I think everybody's here ready to start except for Ben Johnson. Paging Ben Johnson. George, you ready?
Yeah.
We'll go ahead and reconvene the county council meeting for February 5th, 4th? 5th? It is the 5th. At 1:59. And we'll move to item 11. George?
Mr. Chair, let me kind of introduce the item. There's several elements today that we're going to talk about and have a discussion on. If for the people who are coming kind of late to the issue, first of all, a lot of these things we've been working on for actually a couple of years, but I think the urgency level correctly ramped up this year, and so we started attacking the problem with the managers group, which I'd like to thank Joe Forte is here today, Tracy Barlow, who was also a big part of working on this, and Jake joined us later in the process. So, and at that time, you know, there was, of course, some frustration with the city fire departments, and of course, at the same time, you know, our folks are under tremendous load, and so we went to work and we identified some issues, and a lot of it had to do with trying to make sure we had some common agreements in place. But then it expanded, of course, and at your direction, you had called for a workshop, and my fear was, because it does involve so many elements of the community, that getting everybody together like the Ocean Center was just going to take too long. So Joe and his staff went to work, and I had gone out and laid some groundwork with the hospital groups, because this system, this emergency medical system, you know, from your house or from your place of business, ties into your first responding fire rescue or your first responding transport folks, and then, you know, they do their work, and we've talked in previous meetings. Great emphasis occurs right off the bat is with our Scene Treat system. It is a tiered system, so we have built-in, you know, protections and a team that works together in the field every day to save lives, and they do it. And I want to impress upon the public, you know, over 100,000 calls a year that they're out there and they're working on. So you have that element of it, and then we do our work, and then we have to take the people somewhere. And of course, in our case, it's to, right now, it's to the emergency rooms of our various hospitals. So it doesn't do any good to work on one end of the problem or one end of the system without working at the other. So the hospitals have been involved in this as well. And then it's time, and we'll talk a little bit about this, even in their industry, the medical industry is constantly evolving. And so we have to evolve with it. And that's what we're looking at today. So they have the same kind of issues that people are filling up their emergency rooms. And so really, you know, when we looked at this problem in totality, you know, we realized that you have several elements of it. You have to really address the need itself. Why is everyone using the emergency system? What are the things that are going on out there? Because our data indicates that a lot of it doesn't have to be an emergency. Various reasons. Maybe they wait too long, maybe they don't understand what's happening, maybe they don't know who to call. So, but what we do know is one of the most spectacular marketing campaigns of a generation, everyone learned to call 911. Everyone knows to do that. So that part, very successful, but what we have is everybody's calling 911, and a lot of it may not be necessary. So we have the very beginning of the problem, wherever the call is made, and then to the receiving body, and then even amongst that, their model changes such that maybe they don't keep a patient in one place and they need to move a patient to another place. So that's part of it as well. Throw in the fact that we have a aging population, we have a lot of assisted living facilities also in the county that also require not only medical care, but a lot of times transport as well. So we got everyone together. Joe did a yeoman's job of bringing all those groups together to work the problem from one end to the other. And I must say, this is one of those things that's a national problem. We're not going to solve the problem, so to speak, of maybe overuse of these emergency services today. But I'm happy to report we're well on our way with a very good program, and I think a commitment to set some benchmarks, measure it, and manage the system the way it should be going forward, and try to take a real dent in helping and educating folks on when to use that system, because that's going to be critical down the road. And on top of that, using some of the emerging technologies and things that are out there as well. We're going to have to, because as you'll see today, even some of the stuff we're proposing, there is a price tag, and we just have to be mindful of that. And I think you have to, like I say, take a look at, and we're doing that, of how you manage that going forward. So today, I'm going to turn it over to Joe, but I think it's important today. This is the type of discussion I'd like to have where if you don't wait for, stop and we'll talk about the issues as they go along at certain points or wherever you have a question, because I don't want it to go too far, because it's really meant to be a very open discussion here today. So Joe, take it away.
Okay. Would you explain that last comment? That you
Joe's going to have some.
I know, but you want it to be open with discussion during or discussions after?
No, I think that during certain parts of it, we'll stop and breathe a little bit and talk a little bit about that element of it, and then we'll go.
You will stop, Joe.
Yeah.
You will stop for a point. Okay.
Or you guys ask a question if you've got something. Hey, I didn't understand that, or where you're going with that. That's fine.
Okay.
But go ahead, Joe.
Thanks.
Thank you, George. Members of council, Joe Pozo, Public Protection. And as Mr. Rectorwall pointed out, today we'll talk about service level and emergency medical services. I'll run through what our presentation is, and Mr. Chair, if anybody has a question along the way, certainly we can stop. As you can see in the audience, there's a whole team of people here behind us. And it includes members of the group that put this presentation together. That includes our medical director, Emergency Medical Services Administration, Jim Bland, who is the chair of the Volusia County Fire Chiefs Association. We have spoken to other key players in all of this. I have personally met on 2 occasions with both hospitals, 2 times each, to discuss various programs that we have on the table. So we try to include as many stakeholders as we possibly can. As Mr. Rectenwall pointed out, I was asked when I went over to Public Protection to make emergency medical services a priority. So within the first week I was over there, I assembled the group I just mentioned, and we went to work. And we worked as a group, and we put everything on the table. We have some recommendations here today for you that are all data-driven, because this business really is data-driven. Response times, types of calls, numbers of calls, and things such as that. One thing I think is important for everybody to understand is the type of system that we are asked to manage, and it's a large system. We have an 1,100 plus square mile county that's the size of Rhode Island. That is not the same throughout as you go through. We have an east side of the county and a west side of the county that is separated in the middle, so it's not contiguous. And it could be upwards to 20 or 40 minutes, depending on where you are, to get from one side of this county to the other. So we have to really establish two different systems, one for the east side and one for the west side. And because they're not contiguous, it's very difficult to share resources from one side of the county to the other when it comes to emergency medical services. Then we have a rural part of the county that presents its own challenges, which are travel times and the time it takes when a emergency medical services incident occurs for us to deploy resources. We do get some assistance there. Fire Services, Volusia County Fire Services in Oak Hill and Pearson. Edgewater gives us assistance down in Edgewater. However, it is a big system to manage. And then the fourth layer of the system is something that we'll discuss today. That's the interfacility transfers, which occur on the average 14 times a day. That's the hospital-to-hospital transfers of patients that Mr. Rechtenwald spoke to. So when you put all of that together, it's a very large system, and I think it's important to understand it from that perspective. We identified issues, and we have made recommendations. And again, and I believe, and I'll present today, they are very focused recommendations. We are just not asking for resources without a plan on how to use those resources. So we've been very focused in that. And really what we're doing here today is presenting these recommendations. They do come with financial impact that the presenter and the group is very aware of, but we have to present it in a way at the beginning so that you see what that financial impact is. We have worked through yesterday to provide options for you because we do understand there is an ability to fund, and we do understand that those are policy decisions when you formulate a budget. So we do have those that we will present to you as well. And we understand that if there is some phasing in of these recommendations, that is how we will proceed. And as we are now, always do the very best that we can to serve the public in emergency medical services. So today we'll go over the current services, challenges and solutions, a little bit more on the comprehensive EMS planning initiative. However, Mr. Rechtenwald and I just spoke to that, what the recommendations are. We have some supplemental initiatives that we will include along the way as we implement the recommendations, what the resulting coverage is, and how that ties into what we will present today is EMS is really driven by demand, and staffing and deploying for emergency medical services, the biggest piece that you have to look at is what the demand level is and what the types of calls you're running and what that really transitions to when you're dispatching a call. We just implemented a new emergency medical dispatch system that Dr. Springer developed, which has had an impact on what we and how we provide service. But that's a big piece. So demand is a big piece. So we'll show you what that looks like today, and then what the resulting coverage will be as we implement these recommendations. And then the summary budget impacts. And again, we're seeking direction. It's our responsibility to bring to you recommendations and to provide you options with those recommendations, which we will do. Our service really composes two key pieces. And the first one is fire response with ALS, so advanced life support staff and equipment. And that is our first tier. When a caller calls in to the 911 center and the dispatchers go through their emergency medical dispatch, they dispatch the most appropriate resource. Sometimes that's police only, sometimes that's fire only, most times it's fire and EMS together. And the second tier is emergency medical services, or EMS advanced life support transport, which is predominantly provided by Volusia County Emergency Medical Services. And then we have our municipal partners that partner with us and provide transport services within their cities. And when asked, they do leave their cities and assist. Our numbers for fiscal year 17-18, 78,300 EMS responses. This is EMS only, our EMS only. Of that, 51,073 transports. Those are key numbers, and we use that data to drive our recommendations. One in particular, when we get to the nurse triage, because there's 27,000 or so calls in there that don't require transports. So that adds to our demand. And so what we have to do there is figure out a way to reduce that demand so that we keep the 911 service available. And out of that, or about 10% of our transports are inter-facility, and that's about 14 a day, and we'll get into that a little bit more. And then our municipal partners, about 11 a day, or 4,018 in fiscal year 17-18. So, as Mr. Rechtenwald said, and pretty much over the summer, there were some things occurring in emergency medical services. And so we had to, that's the first thing that we really had to look into, and that was, what really is going on, and what's keeping us from meeting response times and, servicing our citizens and visitors with EMS. So, one of the things we found was the scheduled and the unscheduled leave slots, and that wasn't being managed correctly. So we went to work on that immediately. And I can tell you that just December and January alone, we have, just by managing it, we're plus 75 hours a day in our staffing. And I get a staffing page every 12 hours, and unless it's truly now, because we have some flu and some things like that going around, we're staffed almost every shift, every day, every 12 hours, fully staffed, and that's the report we get. So we're managing that effectively, very effectively now. And the crews themselves and people are working over, holding over, to make sure that, that we maintain the budgeted full-time units that we have on the schedule.
So just to clarify, Joe?
Yes, ma'am.
You're saying that once you assessed and addressed the personnel areas that you were able to quickly work to address a good portion
Almost
of that?
immediately.
Immediately?
Yes, ma'am.
Okay. And okay.
Okay.
Thank you.
And we found that, that we were lagging just a little bit in our recruitment and retention. So I put an edict out that by February 15th that all the full-time positions had to be filled. One of the issues that we have is when we hire paramedics, it takes about 90 days or so to get that paramedic cleared, and about 45 days to clear a paramedic. So you have to keep up with that. And yes, ma'am.
What do you mean by cleared?
Cleared is you hire a paramedic, and I'll use the paramedic because that's the more higher level trained. So we hire a paramedic, and there is an established clearing process. We want to make sure that they have the knowledge, skills, and abilities to perform to the level in Volusia County. So really, that is managed by Dr. Springer.
Because they work under his license. So, right.
Yes.
Right, so there's a requirement, it's pre-established. The doctor needs to have assurances that these people are performing and know what the protocols and such are for the county.
Yes, sir. So,
Joe, you've also, can you speak to your work with Human Resources now?
Yes, yes.
And the lack thereof prior and,
yes, ma'am.
Right now.
So now, today, we're fully staffed with paramedics. We filled all of our positions.
and how
we
many were you
have-
down?
And we have, how many were?
Were you down?
8 or 9 or so seems to be a number, but we're fully staffed. And we also have permission to overslot those paramedic positions. So we overslot 4 paramedic positions, and we can do that because we have vacancy savings. And again, we do that because it takes so long to clear paramedics. So if one decides to leave, we want to be able to fill that almost immediately. And we're down 3 EMTs now. However, we have been interviewing, so I don't expect us, because I know we have a list of EMTs that we're going through and interviewing, so I don't expect us not to have that filled over the next 7 to 10 days. So we'll have all of those positions filled as well.
And am I correct in our discussions that there will now be basically an open enrollment as you
Open.
have for deputies?
Yes, ma'am.
And other positions like that, but there will
Here's-
be.
And on
Here's what
top,
I-
and on top of that, we have a pool of intermittent employees. Now, some of those employees don't want to be full-time, so, but it's certainly a place that they've gone through, they've worked with us, they've probably been cleared. So the idea, we always look in that pool as well, of the intermittents. A lot of times people are going to school, they're doing other things, and they just want to work to this intermittent pool with us, but it is also a place where we're pulling people from on a regular basis.
Director Wall's
Also,
correct.
another question.
Ma'am.
Okay, and we had the money there, correct?
Yes, ma'am.
For the
Yes, ma'am.
employees?
Yes,
Thank
ma'am.
you.
But this is a good change that we're now doing.
It's
that
a wonderful
you're now
change.
incorporating that we were not doing.
It's a
Right.
wonderful change, because here's what else we're doing. As we interview paramedics and as we fill those positions, the people on the list, we will offer positions to either part-time or intermittent. So we can get them in, get them cleared, so when we do have vacancies, we can just pick people up off the intermittent list, and it's a much easier and quicker transition for us. April 1st, we are putting a new schedule out. Another thing that we found was, right now between 4:15 in the morning until about 6:30 or 7, that's the majority of the shift changes because they're on 12-hour shifts. And there are 2 places predominantly that they go back to, Carswell Avenue and down here in Orange City off 1792. So there was some congregating there as people were coming on and people were leaving, so you're out of position. So we made some pretty quick adjustments there, and the time that we start to have the crews go back to get off, so we've become much, much more efficient there. And you'll see later in the presentation where we want to sort of spread that out a little bit so we don't have everybody going back to the same place all the time, because they are out of position, and it does affect response times. And so,
And when Joe means by position, just, I want to bring back, because we've had this discussion before, we use a very high-tech software to position them, using 10 years worth of data at any given time. So it's very scientifically driven. So they start off in a position in the field where they're most likely to get a call. That's difficult it's difficult on our staff, but it pre-positions them. And then they have to eventually come out of that position. Of course, they're called out of it on a regular basis, and then we're moving them around and filling back into those areas again. But what Joe's saying, but towards the end of the day or the end of the shift, more and more they're getting away from those areas as they were coming in, because they have to travel so far to get there. So we're trying to make the distance travel to get to your post to begin with a lot less, and give them some places too, because they need places to do their paperwork, go to the bathroom, have lunch, do certain things. So we're trying to help them out, because they do live it's a tough gig to be out there for 12 hours in that ambulance.
and things that came out of the new schedule, and demand out of what we were looking at the staffing. There were some positions that we hadn't filled and that we have now. And so through that, we're able to add another unit in the evenings for 12 hours on the west side. So we'll match the east side. We'll have 6 units around the clock on the west side and 6 units around the clock on the east side, and everything else is peak time, which is how it should be. And we were able to find enough efficiencies in the new schedule. We're going to be adding a truck on beach side, and we're going to position that at beach headquarters Monday through Friday for 8 hours a day during the peak times. We had, we have some areas in the county because we're dynamically deployed, so that system is really for an urban setting, and we have some response time lags, which we'll discuss. And we did discover one was on beach side because we're not always on the other side of the river. So we're going to position a unit over there beginning in April. So we found some efficiencies. We're using those, and because now we have this new hiring practice, continuous hiring, which Human Resources works very closely with us on. We've done a lot with this staffing piece. Demand. So we've talked about demand, and that includes everything. Those are 911 calls, interfacility transfers, the non-transport calls, skilled nursing home calls, special events. Those all add to our demand. What you did do this budget year was you approved 8 FTEs, which we have in place, that staff the BLS transport units, which assist with BLS transports. We have a pilot program in Holly Hill and Daytona Beach that we use one primarily for, and we're getting ready to make some adjustments with that. We want to try one of those here over here on the west side as well, because we have some BLS transports over here. So, and what that does is that does free up the advanced life support 911 system ambulances. We have the right response, patient release, alternative transport program in place. I'm happy to report that the patient release portion of that went into effect on the 4th, Monday, yesterday. So we're excited about that, and we're working on the alternative transport piece, which is the taxi voucher program that you approved with the funding that we came forward with several weeks ago. And we have new EMD that went in place, which has driven calls down for Volusia County EMS about 20%, which is...
That's big, by the way.
That is
think
huge.
Think about those numbers for a minute and think about what that does, because that's, again, getting our resources on the important calls.
Explain the EMD, Joe. Say
Yeah.
what the EMD is.
Yeah, let's talk a little bit about
Emergency,
that.
emergency medical dispatch,
Spell it
which is a system, national system, that prioritizes calls in the 911 center. So the telecommunicator receives the call, has a electronic algorithm that comes up, and through questionings from the telecommunicator, you're able to drill down with the patient to assess, is this a high priority call, high acuity call, chest pain, choking, somebody's having a baby, heart attack, those sorts of things, trauma, or the lower acuity calls as you go down. And that's just done through our trained telecommunicators who do a very good job with that. They're also trained to pick up when it is an emergency right away, so they can dispatch the proper resources, and if there's any questions that they have to finish, then they can finish that when the call is going on. So it's a very efficient system that we have made more efficient. There's some national, programs and software that you buy for those, and Dr. Springer led a team, and we have developed our own because we have some very unique situations here, as I talked about. East side of the county, west side of the county, there's different call volumes. The rural areas, we have air transport as well from the sheriff's office, so that's huge, and that's a real success. And of course, we thank Dr. Springer for all the hard work that he did on that. And We knew we had a demand issue, so we've upstaffed units. And, I knew there was an issue, so I, gave approval because we have the overtime for up to 4 additional units in a 12-hour period. And that's either with intermittent part-timers or full-timers. And we staff and have been staffing between 1 to 3 additional units each 12-hour period. That's important. That's an important number to remember. So when we get to the interfacility discussion, we've already seen the impact of those additional units taking, the load off of the demand because, we want to meet the 911 demand, but we also want to be able to meet that interfacility demand as well because they both have patient outcomes, and we want to make sure that they're all positive. So there are some service impacts. Offload delays at the hospitals creates an impact that sometimes goes overlooked. And we average about 19 of those a day, between 18 and 19 of those a day. And that has stayed, pretty current. We get a very good report every 12 hours on what the, last shift's activity was, and it covers a lot of these things. So that is a real thing, and that's a real thing in our service. Now, we have implemented with our system status controllers. So we have in the 911 center an EMS supervisor whose job is to sort of run the board for the EMS units. And
they are medically trained paramedics. Just make that point.
And we have, they have a software program we call Force Watch that comes up, and they follow all the EMS units all around the county. It's real time. And we also have another, Mr. Rechtenwald mentioned it. We have a software called Marvelous, and that's the historical data, call data that tells us, tells that system status controller where the predictable calls will occur. So as the units get busy and they get tied up on calls, they can move units around. The other thing that they do is they monitor where the transports are going. And they did a fabulous job this morning. You may have saw the news, there was a mass casualty incident this morning in Daytona Beach. We had, there was, upwards of 10 or 11 patients, and we dispatched, I think, 6 medic units, 5 medic units. And that was controlled where they went, to the hospital, so we wouldn't overload the hospitals. So that's one thing that the system status controllers do as well. And we work with the hospitals on this. As Mr. Rechtenwald said, this is a national issue. And it happens, when there's no beds available up top, then things begin to stack up down on the bottom, and that's what happens. But we do have continuous dialogue. And of course, the interfacility transfers, skilled nursing home calls, which we talked about. We have worked with Advent Hospital to defer some of the transfers at their request, and we work with them, and they handle some of those on their own, and that's through a contract that we had with the foundation that carried over with the county. But again, those 1 to 3 extra units we have every day really helps us managing that because it is additional resources. So the next slide, sort of shows us what our demand is today. The blue line there is our scheduled full-time units. We don't count the extra units in there because we may have 1, we may have 3, we may have 4. So I think when you look at this, you have to look at it from a real-time perspective of these are our full-time units. And what's in green is the number of 911 calls, and what our demand is, and the yellow stacked on top of that are the interfacility calls. So you can see that's 1 to 2 an hour. And the interfacilities occur 24 hours a day and generally occur more towards the end of the week than they do at the beginning of the week when we ran the data on that. So you can see there are times during the day that our demand does exceed, what we're staffed for. And that's where, our municipal partners come in and they assist, with EMS transport during those times of the day. So our budget, our 18-19 budget is $23,576,288. The general fund contribution is $5,897,416. That's important when we get to the options later, and I know what council is focused on, and that's why we have developed some options for you to look at as we get down into later in the discussion. We talk about the recommendations, and I think that's important because again, that's where we get to how we implement these recommendations, and then our historical FTE count.
I think, and I'd like to jump in on that FTE count because there's been some discussion, and that discussion led to a lot deeper investigation because we were adding positions. This council was doing what it was supposed to do and adding the positions when asked. We on our end were failing in that we weren't filling the positions. So I want to make that clear that the council had allocated positions and growth, but on our side, we weren't getting it done when it gets to getting the people, or we couldn't hang on to them. I mean, it's not like, again, I want to emphasize, it's a long, hard process. They had, they have success, get some folks in, 2 or 3 would leave. Paramedics are in high demand. At one time, paramedics, there was a few spots for them. Every fire department now, with the exception of DeLand, carries a full complement of paramedics. Paramedics are being used more and more in doctors' offices and hospital situations, and they're taking their education to the next level, and they're moving on into other things. So I don't want to make, no one was sleeping, but we didn't get the job done. I mean, for whatever reason, we didn't make it. So, and that's what Joe, was talking about, well, when we really got to the bottom of it, we're adding the positions, but where are they? And they weren't getting through, and he's done a great job of making sure that they are doing it. And it's a priority constantly because he just can't let up the pressure because, like I say, today someone could walk in the office and say, I'm taking a job somewhere else. And now we're looking at a clearing time. So now that we've got people in the batter's box or the circle, on deck circle. Sorry, Joe. I was trying to get to your baseball love. So anyway,
Put them in the bullpen.
getting them ready to go so you can get up there and hit. So we're there.
We have really worked very hard on that, and I tell you why. I can't stand here in front of you and put recommendations, on the table, and tell you that we need extra people and extra resources if I'm not filling the resources and putting them on the street that I already have. So I recognize that early, and so my commitment to you is that won't happen. That's why we have continuous hiring now, and we're trying to get intermittent positions filled so we can draw from them as quickly as we can. So response times, and this is our reaction time plus travel time. That's what we measure here, or shoot time as you might hear it. That's an industry term. And because we're dynamically deployed, our shoot times are very narrow, okay? Because they're in the ambulance, they get the call, and they go responding, and so that should be, 15, 20 seconds, okay? Really, I mean, that's about how long that should take. Do we have exceptions with that? We do, and when we have those exceptions, we have a wonderful quality assurance team that goes through calls on a daily basis, and when they discover those things, we run that back to operations for them to ask questions and deal with. And then we have, of course, the travel time.
I know.
And travel time is another one of those measurements that have tremendous nuances to it. It's speed limits of roads, it's the type of road, it's the weather conditions, whether it's raining. We don't get snow here, but it's whether it's raining, what the traffic patterns are, the time of the day.
Congested.
Yeah, so, you just, it's very hard when you're measuring travel time to say, this, it's an exact science, because it is not. And because we don't share resources contiguously with the east and the west side of the county, if all the west side units are tied up in a matter of 10 or 15 minutes, and we're trying to move units from the east side to the west side, and they get a call 3 or 4 minutes into their movement, then they have a 15-minute travel time just to get to the west side of the county. So I say that only because I want you to always keep that in mind.
And one of the
Please.
reasons we have a two-tiered system. It's not just because, but part of, what we have here is we're covering that by having, by using both parts of our emergency system, both sections of it, fire and transport. So, and again, I can't stress that enough, that you have those first responders, the firemen, who also, by the way, and I always remind people tend to think that, you're showing up and there's someone sick. Well, they may be sick up on the roof of their house. They may be crumpled up in a car, and they got to be cut out of there. So that element, I can't stress enough. The firemen go on out, and they're the rescue folks that get you and start that work. That's the way our system sets. But because of our size, and you do have over 50 fire stations active in the county, we're pretty well covered, and we'll talk about that at another time on where we need to adjust that stuff. But for the most part, working with the cities, you have that first response covered by your fire department, and then these guys are in pre-positioned areas to come as the second part of the tier.
Okay, let's move it a
We're trying.
little bit faster. And we've all had this. I know some of you haven't.
So these are response times, and I'll go to the next slide, and this is through the new EMD, and you can see where there's been some improvement here under the new EMD, and particularly in the priority and the priority E.
And that's making sure that our stuff goes to the real emergency. That's what a lot of that's about.
And we've been over the comprehensive EMS planning, so let's get to the recommendations, okay?
Let's get to
That's
it.
what everybody's been waiting
I
for,
think
so let's begin.
everyone can see, Joe, the comprehensive job and the information that's been developed into this plan. And you've done an excellent job on that, and I think some of us are anxious to see what we've seen.
We're here, sir.
Yeah, we're there.
I
All
got
right.
you. I got you where you want to be.
That's it.
So the
Joe-
first
Joe-
recommendation.
Joe, I think what we can all see is that you've come in, you've assessed, and you've advised us that there are some issues that need to be taken care of, and you have taken that lead.
Let's move on.
That's good.
Okay,
I think that's
so
all I said.
the first recommendation, one, deals with interfacility transfers. And as I said, that's a big part of our system. It's one of the 4 layers that we deal with every day. So our recommendation is to revise our EMS model, maintain the interfacilities, but sort of carve that out and staff and deploy units specifically to do the interfacility transfers, which frees up then the 911 system. To do that, our recommendation as a group is to staff 4 of those, which would be, it's pretty much 2 around the clock, and they're in 12-hour shifts. So we would have 4 sets that would be doing that. So we'd have 2 around the clock to handle that. One of our recommendation is to look at phasing out perhaps the long distance interfacilities to Tampa, Gainesville. We've gone as far as Miami, and that's a long way. Yes, ma'am? I see you.
We've had this conversation, so you just surprised me with considering phasing out, because I was told we are phasing that out, that's going to go away. So is it a consideration, or is it going to happen?
That would be direction that you would give us.
Yeah, it would require an ordinance.
Okay.
So that's why we made sure the
This is Denny's,
terminology.
this
yeah.
is seeking your direction.
Right.
Our recommendation is to phase it out. So when I say we're considering it, it would be for your consideration.
But we have to have a source to phase it to. So that's the
Understand.
other part of the equation. Again, working with the hospitals, working with the other partners out there to see how we would do that. And but it's definitely, when you lose a vehicle to Miami, you've lost that vehicle for the day.
So in the interfacility transfer is the discussions that I've been involved in that we've talked about. We're looking at almost setting it up like an enterprise fund. Is that right, George? Is that?
Yes, segregating it, right, segregating it within that department or that division. It would be segregated out and tracked separately because it also, we'll get into that, the revenue issues associated with that and making sure that, that it is, again, being handled. And the hope is, if, again, continuing to work with the hospitals. And like I said, this is not something that we just, we walk away. This is the beginning of a shift of cooperation that I think will become a national model. But the idea is that if we do this correctly, they may be available to assist the emergency system rather than pulling from it. Right now, they tend to pull from it. And I want to go the other direction where, when they're maybe not making an interfacility and there's a mass casualty like today, like we had, that they could be interjected right away into the emergency system.
So, Joe, just to clarify then, when you're separating the interfacility transport and you're, now we're specifically focusing on these people do interfacility transport and these now do the response.
Yes, ma'am.
That alleviates the issue of getting a call, basically. So any calls, getting a call for interfacility transport, someone being tied up on that, because I think part of the issue before, correct me if I'm wrong, was once you are with a patient, you can't exactly, whether
Right.
they're interfacility transport, whether they're a hangnail or stroke, you can't let them go and suddenly go respond to something more
Handle one
immediate.
call at a time when
Right.
you're on the scene. Yes, ma'am.
So that alleviates that and frees up
Does.
people to be able to respond to emergency issues.
Does, and it creates flexibility with that. I mean, we say we're going to staff it when our recommendation is this way, but we could change that and do it at different times, peak times. As we monitor the data, this is flexible. It's flexible staffing on how we deploy these 4 units. That answer your question?
I
Okay.
just wanted you to clarify.
So the cost to do this, we would have to purchase 4 ambulances, and then there's the cost of the people, and then the yearly operating cost. And the total package on the recurring cost is $1.2 million, as you see there. And then there's a one-time cost for the ambulances, and these are fully stocked ambulances, the cardiac monitor, the stretcher, and those sorts, and the ancillary equipment. That's the cost to get that started. Yes?
Go back to
Yes,
that
ma'am.
page a minute.
Yes, ma'am.
So what am I missing? So I'm looking at your recommendation number 1 on cost to implement, and the 9 summary of the budget impacts in the back lines up with the 914,656, but the recurring costs,
The 6 number?
I'm showing, well, just for.
Because we have partial year,
So you divided it, you
yeah,
split
it's
it
an
up.
annualized
Okay.
year, so.
All right, I got it, Joe, I'm good.
Does that answer you?
Yep, it
Help
does.
you? Okay.
I got it.
Yes, ma'am. So recommendation number 2, because we have this gap in dispatch calls and the gap of the transport calls, we need to continue to chew away at that, okay? Because that, excuse me, hands, that frees up the 911 ambulances. The EMD has already helped, and one program that nationally does that is nurse triage. And the idea here is to put a nurse in the 911 center. And so as the telecommunicators go through their emergency medical dispatch, as they get to the low acuity calls, that they determine potentially doesn't need transport to an emergency department, then they transfer that caller to the nurse, who then goes through their algorithms, their sort of emergency medical dispatch, to determine where's the best place for this person to receive care. What type of care do they need? Or do they need to go anywhere right now? So that's what this does. I've worked with Las Vegas and their system and have been in contact with them, and they have seen, and they do theirs 12 hours a day for certain days of the week, and they've seen a reduction of 4,000 to 5,000 calls just through their nurse triage. And then getting those people to the right care facility that they need to be at. So to do this, there's a cost, and there's some initial startup costs. We are proposing 8 registered nurses at a per diem rate, not to make them employees, 12 hours a day, Monday through Friday to start. We picked that because those are when these alternative care centers are open.
Right.
So it just makes sense to do that. And so the ongoing cost is $239,000 plus a year. And then there's the initial one-time cost because we have to train them to work in the telecommunications center. So we talked at the beginning about Carswell, Orange City, the 2 main hubs, so to speak. And we need to spread that out. So when they're changing shifts, they're not all in one place. So we need to spread it out a little bit. So we're proposing to use, we already used DeLand Fire Station 82, Volusia County Fire Station 23 at Wallace Road and 44 in New Smyrna Beach. We're already doing some work there, and we would include EMS in our plans. We already have, so that we could change some units out there. DeLand Fire Station 83, we already have an agreement there. We're going to get that back up and running. And Volusia County Fire Station 12. And these are just so we can strategically switch units out, and it spreads it out as you can see on the map. Again, it's just not centralized into one area. There is some cost to this. There's some annual cost for some utility stuff at the Volusia County fire stations and some one-time cost computers for the office there and things such as that. And we would add 1 ambulance service technician. The way our deployment system works, when the paramedic and EMT arrive, they really just get the keys to the ambulance, the bag, the radio, and they're assigned to unit number 54. They go get in there, turn it on, log on, and go. The ambulance service technicians clean and prepare and restock the ambulances. That's a very efficient way to do business. It's turnkey, and when they get off, they just turn the keys in. So the other issue that we saw, in which I talked about, and we do have some extended response gaps. North Peninsula, Osteen area, Tomoka Farms, South Beach, down in New Smyrna Beach, northeast, north of Ormond Beach. We do not dynamically deploy in those areas because they're not the urban areas where that system is made for. So we recommend to address that, and in fiscal year 2020, or as you deem appropriate, starting with 2 of those units, 1 at North Peninsula, 1 at Osteen, 12 hours a day. We want to see how this works, because this is moving EMS away from what the traditional deployment model is, which is dynamic deployment, and we're going to a hybrid system. There's a cost to ambulances equipped. You see the cost there, and then we would need 8 people to do that, so there's an annualized cost of $607,902. Good. Okay.
Good.
Then recommendation number 5 in the out years. What this plan does for us is it gives us a good foundation. We've addressed interfacility, we've carved that out. We're beginning now to address these extended response gaps. So what this does is, this is a cost for a 12-hour unit, 7 days a week. if we need it. And we have trigger points for this. Again, as I promised at the beginning, I won't come to you and say, I got to have this, got to have this. We would have trigger points: performance of the system, growth, demand, ability to meet established response time performance, system needs. Do we need advanced life support, basic life support, the ability to fund, okay, because that's an important component of all of this planning. And of course, it may require an increase in the fleet. Response time goals. There is no national standard for EMS agencies. There isn't. There is for fire through National Fire Protection Association. EMS accrediting agencies generally leave that up to a locality to develop if they're going through the accreditation process. And so, what you hear about 4 and 8 minute response times, that's NFPA 1710. Does not apply to EMS unless EMS is part of the fire department.
Joe?
Got my hand off the
Joe,
clicker,
so I'm going
ma'am.
to talk to you about that. Can you speak to that, though? Because can you speak to generally what do other EMS around the state or in all the other counties, anywhere
It
someone has to
depends.
use something for a
It
minimal
depends.
standard response time?
Some use the national, there's a sort of national benchmark perhaps for EMS, the 859.
So there is a
Some-
general benchmark that
Some
EMS
use
uses.
1059, some use 1159. It just depends on what type of system they have when they're going through their service level. It
We
really
don't know
does.
what their service level is, and we don't know what they're
Different.
doing. So say that again. There is no.
Right.
There is
Back
none,
up and say that again.
there
That
is
one-
not for EMS. You
Right,
cannot go to a book and there is a
Well,
national.
and remember
state-
too, we have a two-tiered system.
Right.
So the idea is, not everyone has that. So we're fortunate in this county, and yes, we're working on it. But what we've done through the years is we have a very professionalized system. A lot of this country still has volunteer fire departments and volunteer EMS.
70%.
So, but where we're at is we're trying to provide an urban, suburban type level of service, but yet a good portion of our county is still rural. So that's the hybrid that he's trying to get to, that to be able to get you a benchmark that's realistic for our citizens, and it follows along the fire line, but again, the other thing, some people have these, but maybe have a benchmark, but I'm not so sure where they are meeting it. We're not going to do something that we're not going to go on out and try and meet and beat. So there's no sense of saying you're going to do something when it's, you're not really going to get there. The best way is to set a goal, which he's going to tell you about, and then if we perfect that, maybe we could, decide we'll go farther. But we'll start here. Go ahead, Joe.
So how about this, Joe? What are you using to determine your goal for the minimum standard response time? And then just answer that question.
I think you have to go to the bottom of this slide, and you establish response times on what your existing capabilities are, your ability to fund that, and what the community expectations are.
And you have come up with a minimum standard.
We do.
You have come up with one
We have goals.
through this process,
Right. With the fire departments, who are our partners.
and that is raised from what we've been doing, obviously, and that is our new goal and our new expectation, because we need a minimum standard response time that we are looking to achieve, correct?
Yes, and let
Thank-
me go over that and explain how
Thank
we
you.
got to that and what it's going to take to get there.
Thank you.
Because I think it's important. And so I'll start with the bottom of the slide. I think any response time objective that we adopt has to coincide with the recommendations we've met, because I could take you back to a previous slide and tell you that the priority Es right now are at 10 minutes and something. Okay? So, I know where we're at today. So if we want to get to that 859, which the group discussed, and we had a lot of discussion with this.
And Joe,
And-
would you say the 1059 it needs work, correct? That's why we're in this process.
I think that,
So we're looking to do the
I think that
859.
what we have to decide together, and we have to decide this together. It's not Joe talking, it's not Dr. Springer talking, this is our decision. as a policy-making group, you, and me giving you what these recommendations are. And this is important because I don't want to take you down a road and promise you that we can meet 859 on these priority emergencies, or that we can get to 1059 and consistently get there, because I know what it takes to get there, and it takes available units, and it takes a combination of managing the interfacility transfers, maybe getting this nurse triage in so we can chip away at what our demand is on calls we don't need to be responding to, and taking care of these response time gaps that we have, places we can't dynamically deploy. It's
so-
important that all of the pieces come together to get to this, and then I would be able to tell you comfortably, I think we're heading in the right direction. We're heading in the direction now,
Absolutely.
but
And so
but
here's
it's
why I want to have
difficult
this
to get to
discussion,
this
though.
unless we have all the pieces
Right.
together.
So here's why I want to have the discussion, because I would hate for us to get so bogged down in the, there is or there isn't a national standard response time, or, really getting, because there is a minimal standard across the board that every county should meet, whether it's written down in a book somewhere or not, there
But it's our
is a minimal
but it's our
acceptable
decision.
standard
It's
that we should
arbitrary.
meet. And
Let's, I know we're trying to arrive at something, but let's try to not try to pin down a time right now, and I think what you
no,
laid
that's my
out-
exact point, is I want us to step away from focusing on a specific number and focus on the fact that as a county, Volusia County, we now need to address what is our minimal standard response time, figure out that number, set that as our goal, and then work to achieve it and maintain it.
I think that's what he's prepared.
And that's exactly what he's doing.
I know that's what he's trying to do, that's what I'm
And
trying to.
as a group, and just one thing I didn't hear.
Let's try to bring this back.
We will.
to-
I just want to make the point, though, the difference here is look at what the life-threatening emergencies are. See, the doctor's setting a protocol on, and when does time matter? Because remember, don't get away from our scene treat and all the other stuff that we do. If you get there in 3 minutes and you don't know what you're doing, it's not going to help. So
This
it's a
is all
good, solid
designed for
a time that the doctor has worked with the fire departments, because the other part of that is, remember, they're there, and they're already starting, and they need help. They need us there to take it on and then do the transport. To have that experience that maybe our person has because they do 10 of these and they don't get to do as many of them, thank goodness, so for them. And the idea is it's that team effort. So this number didn't come arbitrarily. It came from a whole group effort to say, these are the emergencies, and by the way, the fire department folks agree with us that this is where they're comfortable at for both of these priorities.
So this is for the first Volusia County EMS transport unit to get on the scene. And as Mr. Rechtenwald pointed out, we do have a two-tiered system. So they can provide the care that's needed. But again, these are objectives. That's why I did make it a recommendation. These are objectives. And I think that collectively, everybody has to just understand what goes into getting to this. And Dr. Springer was a big part of this, and he's comfortable with, because he was there every meeting,
Right.
comfortable with what we have here. However, there are pieces that have to go to this for us to begin to achieve these objectives.
Joe?
Yes,
to-
ma'am.
Before we move on, and their objectives, and the last thing that should come away from this presentation and going forward are those numbers written down, because there will always be outliers.
Oh.
Always be outliers, we know that.
Absolutely.
But I
Exceptions.
don't want to see a report come out 30 days since this meeting, and we've got X amount that did not hit this benchmark of 859 or 1059, and so
We're not even going to start measuring it this way, ma'am.
But I know, but my point is, I'm trying to make a statement here and put an exclamation on it at the same time, that this is a discussion we're all going to work to get there, knowing that there's outliers.
Right.
And if should you be 2 seconds or a minute, 0.1 off, I don't,
Right. I think
George,
your point,
take it,
let me,
because
yes,
this-
let me just help you out,
I
right?
know where this is going to
Yeah,
try to
exactly,
go.
but we're not,
Happy we're fixing it.
right. The idea is, remember, these are ways we measure, and remember Joe said earlier about the trigger points. See, we'll all know as the load factor is rising, as we're growing, it's time to be looking at this asset again, or looking at this, rather than it waiting to become some sort of a crisis or a lot of anecdotal stories. It's more about, no, well, we're presetting, where we want to get to, and then when we're there, how to maintain it. And remember, that does say 90th percentile. So the idea being 90% of the time you're hitting that. We already know if you fall out of a tree in rural Pearson, it's probably going to take longer than that, no matter what. I mean, that's just because of the geography part that we talked about. So, again, it's 90th percentile. There always will be outliers. And go ahead, Joe.
Okay. So, and then, of course, we have the rural response, as Mr. Brechtenwald just aptly pointed out. So we have that we have to contend with. And, some communities don't set it at the 90th percentile. Some set it at the 85th or the 80th percentile. So it's really how we want to measure it. These are goals that we've had. And, of course, then there's always, those very low acuity calls that we say no more than 2% of the calls responded to take over 59 minutes and 59 seconds. And this really would tie into the nurse triage more if we can get that established. So with the recommendations, this would be the resulting coverage. And you can see that we live at the line of demand or just a little above it at certain times of the day, and then there's some hours of the day that we don't. But, you can't. Somebody taught me a long time ago, you can plan for an emergency today, and it's the worst emergency you can plan for, and then tomorrow there's a worse emergency that you have to plan for. So you have to plan for, what you can afford and what the community's expectations are. And I think this chart gets us to what the community's expectations are. There are a few other things we know are important. Educating the public on the appropriate use of the EMS system. It's a big public education campaign that we're developing now. Educate the public about our comprehensive two-tiered system, what to expect when you call 911, why did the fire engine, show up, and then what to expect when you transport it. I think that's an important education piece. We are and have been working, the managers group that Mr. Rechtenwald spoke to has been working on a new municipal transport agreement, and we look to get that implemented soon.
Hey, go back to that slide, one before, real quick.
Which one,
The
sir?
one with the curve.
That there?
Yeah, because, again, I can't help, there's going to be a few peak loads, and I think that, again, working with our municipalities, they can help us out if they have that willingness to do that in their community. So they have, but what they're seeking is standardization with these agreements and an expectation of what their load would be, because that's not their number one priority to transport. So they want to know, well, what can they expect? And that's what we're trying to give them.
And as I was working with particularly Halifax on the nurse triage, there's a huge public education piece that would have to go with that, so people would know what to expect when they call 911 and they get redirected to a nurse. And then a spin-off of the nurse triage, which also cuts into demand, is community paramedicine, where we would use certainly EMS units, fire units, And this is where you go by to folks who you know call regularly, who may not be, may not be taking their medication regularly, and that's the reason why they're calling, or they just have these chronic conditions that if you went by to make sure everything was okay, you're saving a 911 call. And it's a huge program that we would get into. But we got to get all this other stuff really headed in the right direction first before we get into that.
And the hospitals do have a after-release care program now. So the idea here would be that either we're identifying our frequent users, or maybe we're filling a gap that the hospitals may find, they have a little bit higher level of care, and it steps down to what maybe we can provide with our people proactively.
That I think is where I'm going to stop and turn it over to Mrs. DePeister and take you through the financial piece, because as I said, we worked through, late yesterday developing some options for you to consider. I know this is a lot, and just putting it in front of you as it is, it's better if you have some alternatives to look at. So,
Let me just say, so pretty much that is the, the goals that we're setting, and then how we would get there. Now we get into, the implementation process, which does involve some finances and timing, because honestly, as we had said, it takes a while to get folks in place. I can't go down to the Chevy dealer and pick out an ambulance and ride it up here. So there are things that have to occur anyway, time-wise. So that's why, again, we're seeking a direction. Joe has done a yeoman's job in doing the things that we can handle right now, and we'll continue to do that, and of course the EMD. So we're already having a positive effect. But the idea is if we're going to make some investment in assets and people and programs, we want to make sure we're going in that direction. And then we'll have to get into the timing. And we can talk a little bit about the money, because, the fund has seen some savings and has seen some revenue increases from what we had projected. So we have some opportunity to get moving if the council desires at a certain part of that in this budget year. And then, of course, the effect of that, going on, because once if you're going to be doing this, there will be an ongoing cost, and that has to be factored into the rising budget. So, Donna, could you maybe put the where we are at now?
If Sue could put the last page of this
yes,
presentation
ma'am.
up, that'd be helpful.
I was waiting.
Okay. What you have before you is the typical presentation that we usually provide in the 5-year forecast when we come before you each year. Ms. Gertman, Mr. Johnson, this is probably the first time you'll actually see one of these. We will be working on the 5-year forecast, which we usually present to you in the June-July timeframe, so you'll see a whole lot more of these. So what we did, first of all, is we had to base things off of last year's forecast, which we did before you as we were preparing and getting ready for the 18-19 budget. And we've updated it at least to the best of our ability right now based on what we know today. This will probably change as we prepare the budget for the 5-year forecast coming up in the next several months. So one of the things we did is we took a look at 18-19, and we looked at what we had budgeted for 18-19 in revenues. And we see that based on what we have experienced in 17-18, we actually had an increase in 17-18's revenues by about $500,000, greater than what we had originally planned in 17-18. We took a peek into where we are so far in the 18-19 year, and it looks like we're going to be up there. So one of the things we were able to do is we said, well, first of all, I think we feel pretty comfortable that we can revise our 18-19 numbers to 16.9 million versus 16.5, which brings us to about another $400,000. What we also looked at was part of the funding is if we have any rollover funds, we also incorporate that as well. Now in the budget, when we're preparing the budget in 18-19, we thought we'd have about $75,000 in rollover funds. Actually, we had more, significantly more, closer to 1.1 million. And that was because, first of all, as I had mentioned earlier, our 17-18 revenues were actually greater than we had planned. So that was about $500,000. We also had some savings in expenditures. Now, some of that was basically fuel costs. Our fuel costs were lower than we had thought. We also had those vacancies that also were played into this as well. So we actually have rollover funds of about 1.1 million that we can also apply. So when you look at 1.1 million in rollover, when you look at about $500,000 or so in additional fees, we have about $1.5 million of additional funds available for us in 18-19. If you so choose to start working on these options in 18-19. Because that was one of our first challenges when Joe darkened my doorstep to say, well, gee, I sure would like to get some of this started now. And I thought, okay, well, let's see. And that's one of the reasons we went back to re-review 18-19. So this presentation before you is predicated on Joe's recommendation about what, in his team, on what they wanted to start in fiscal year 18-19. So in the first year, it's desired to, or recommended that we would go ahead and buy for one-time equipment costs for the interfacilities, and that's about $900,000. And then we could partially fund some of the folks, the staff that we would have to hire for part of the year, as well as some of the operational costs. So we're able to fund it, if you so choose, out of those rollover monies to kind of get started on at least this piece, or I should say recommendation number 1, if you so choose in 18-19. Now, if you scan all the way down to the bottom, you'll notice we also have reserves. And these reserves is what we set for during the budget period in 18-19. It doesn't affect those reserves because the majority of those reserves are for equipment replacement, because we have to build equipment replacement funds in that fund, because eventually they're going to be replacing auto pulses, they're going to be replacing their defibrillators, they're going to be replacing stretchers, et cetera, all that ancillary equipment that they need to replace when they reach their end of life. So we build up those funds and then we take them down as we purchase along the way. I forgot what their useful life is. It's usually around 3 to 5 years if I'm not mistaken. So we fund for that. So if you wanted to start option 1, you could in 18-19. What it also doesn't affect is your general fund contribution either. Your general fund contribution was planned at about $5.8 million in 18-19. We can leave it at that for 18-19. So if we look at 19-20, what happens is as we start looking forward to 19-20? Well, what we do know is that in 19-20, we expect to see a little bit uptick in our ambulance revenues. The projections that you see for the 19-20 year as far as revenues for 19-20 pretty much were what we had I should say the revenues for the ambulance fees, the bad debt recovery, et cetera, was pretty much what we had projected, if I'm not mistaken, for fiscal year 18 in the 5-year forecast. We just upped it based upon what we know, what we believe will happen in ambulance revenues increases for 18-19 years. So we're rolling that forward into 19-20 and the outer years. What we did on the expenditure side, we rolled in Mr. Pozo and team's recommendation for the other items that were on the options list. It was options 1, of course, is rolling forward into 19-20. You now have a full year of options 1's ongoing costs are now going to, for that interfacility, now start to present itself in 19-20 because you'll be doing this for the full year. We also put in the ongoing costs for the nurse triage, along with the one-time costs for the nurse triage. Again, we started funding his recommendations for the service centers and the North Penn Osteen Fire Station changes that need to be made to make those the static deployment model. So you start funding pretty much the majority of these recommendations in 19-20. And as you can clearly see, the costs go up. They go up close to $26 million. How do we fund that? Well, if you look at the general fund contribution on the 4th line down on the revenues, yes, fourth line down on the revenues, you'll notice that we have to pump in about 18.4 million out of the general, from the general fund into the EVAC fund in order to fund these changes. Again, we were looking at 5.9 million in the 18-19 year, which will go up to $8.4 million, excuse me. Sorry. Thank you.
You didn't
Thank you,
mean
George.
18 million, you meant 8 million.
Almost needed a defibrillator.
Defibrillator right there. So
I know, excuse me. So again, and by doing so, we still preserve your reserve for future capital. Again, we still have to do replacement. Again, I believe they will be relooking at that again for the 19-20 year going forward, because we're going to probably realign some things. But based upon what we know on last year, it maintains those reserves going forward. If you look at 2021, again, it's putting in the rest of the recommendations. The general fund contribution does go up to 9.2 million, and then when you get into 21, 22, where most of the changes have already been implemented and put into place, your general fund contribution goes up to 9.6 million. So that demonstrates the recommendations that was included in the presentation. There's obviously, we can move some things around if you want to shift some of the timing of this. We can do that. You'll just basically spread it over 19, 20, and 2021 years. If you want to realign it, you can. You don't have to spend anything today if you don't want to. We can just shift it off. At the end, though, when you get to 21, 22, this is what 21, 22 we left alone, because we just rolled some of these changes in between the two fiscal years.
Ms.
We've
Denny-
got those presentations. If you want to see those, we can put those up.
Ms. Dennis.
Thank you, Mr. Chair. This is a conversation we've needed to have for a long time. Thank you for all the great work and the hours that have gone into this. This indeed is just for direction. It's just for direction today, right,
Right.
Mr. Rechtenwald, and discussion from
that's
council?
correct. I mean, we say we have some other scenarios to play that would do, but eventually, I think Donna said it right, is that, well, the final column over there, it's about how you're going to get
Right.
to that, how fast or slow you want to do that, but eventually you're going to be there. Now, what I say with one caveat, though, is that now the nurse and that's why I made Joe, when we did this originally, I wanted that nurse triage in the beginning of the because, and this is what we've been saying all along, as that grows, and it's very important, there's no doubt, it's a big part of our community, but if we don't do our job, I think, on the other side of the nurse triage and some of these things to try to stem that flow, I think we owe it to the citizens and to look and really educate and work on with a nurse triage and how you use this emergency system, because we need to try and knock that growth down a little bit. So that those trigger points that Joe's talking about, we can maintain a good system. We have good response times. We're getting the good outcomes, and we're not having to add a lot of assets at that point. So if we do a good job with those other things, it should level off, and then you just have the more normal expenditure increases from inflation or raises or what have you. They're not necessarily system changes. So I just want to make that point, but what we tend to show here is a conservative, but I'm kind of betting that, especially with the enthusiasm that we have, that I think that nurse triage and some of the things we'll try to stem that flow. So maybe we won't be quite as expensive as we're looking at in the year 3.
And but looking at this, when we first got the PowerPoint, I'm going to back it up a little bit with my
Yep.
discussion with staff. When I first got this and had the conversations, I'm looking at all these numbers, and I said, well, at that point, we did not have the staff analysis to the budget. So all we had was, here's our recommendation, here's the bottom line. I went, well, where's the options? There were no options for council, there was no budget implications for council. And
So
this is, I know we're treating this like a workshop, council, but I know some of us wanted a meeting. We wanted a workshop to talk about this in a little more in depth. And I got to tell you, I'm disappointed that didn't happen. I shared that with staff. George, I mean.
Yes, you did.
I'm on the record in August asking for it, and it's still not been identified in that report that we get every agenda item with with a council member request. And I know some of my other colleagues had requested a meeting too. So we're going to have, this is the time we can talk about it. It's the only time we talk about it.
Right.
You know, management talks, everybody has their talks, then it comes to council, and here it is, and there's the bottom line. So I think this, first of all, this is really good work. For the record, this is really, really good work. We need to strengthen the system without a doubt, and everybody's committed to strengthening the system without a doubt. But looking at this, what's not been said, and we talked about it earlier in the day in another issue with no tax increases, not going to support any tax increases. Okay, this is a tax increase. Let's call it right up front. It's a $500,000 tax increase. If you look at the bottom line, that's a $500,000 tax increase. So you can't, there's a wish list, then there's a want list, there's a wish list, got to do it and need to do it. So I don't know how we're going to get to where we want to go, where council wants to go, but just know if council decides that we're going to implement everything that's presented, it comes with a $500,000 tax increase.
It's 0.05.
Okay,
Yeah.
so
And by the way, that's good.
that's,
I will say going forward on a lot of these projects, we're going to make that equivalent discussion more prominent.
issue.
We need to do that because, you know, to be fair to you and to the citizens, we're being asked to upgrade a lot of things. So at the end of the day, we are going to have to make some decisions budgetarily. So we'll be keeping track. These are the first out of the gate because it's very important. And but that's part of what we're committed to do is it'll be very open, you know, as we go along. And it's impossible for you guys to make final decisions without seeing things in totality. So today you've got this issue, and there's some importance that, you know, and there are things again that we are already doing and we can do in this year. And that's why, again, we're seeking direction. We'll come back and say, all right, if you decide you want to get started this year buying some ambulances, we can get that going. And if you want to decide, like I say, the portion of the personnel in the facility, we can start setting that up, because what we're showing is you got the one-time money to get going, and it's from that fund. So, I mean, it's a good, you know, it's a good thing. And then, again, so we're moving in that direction. Meantime, you're going to have other meetings, not only with this, but with other issues that are coming at you financially. But we'll have kind of the chart, you know, we have that, and now we'll be adding that. So maybe we'll subtract this over there at the end of the day. So that's why it wouldn't be fair for you to say, hey, today, you know, we're all in at all points. It's a discussion to say, yet we like that direction, and what should we get moving on right now?
And
Okay.
to that end, it's about setting priorities. We talked about a workshop. I think this is priority one, very, very genuine. I think we all agree for our citizens and what we do. This is priority one. First responders, priority one, without a doubt, for the safety of our citizens. So I want to hear what the rest of the council has to say, and then I'll come back again, Mr. Chair. Thank
Okay.
you.
Ms. Post.
Joe, if you could just answer, this entire presentation brings us up to a comfortable level of service, correct? Would you say that?
The recommendations in here create a positive impact on the service delivery. So, you know, it's not
Politics at its finest. All
whether
right.
it's comfortable or it's not comfortable. What it does is, you look at the last chart, and it gets it to a point we can manage.
Okay, that's good.
What it does.
Thank you, Joe. So what I would say is the deficiencies have been brought to our attention. We've discussed them over several months. There are obvious deficiencies that have been noted and worked on very diligently. So I will say that, oh my gosh, the work that has been done in the last several months on this has been amazing. But the point is that there have been deficiencies that have gone on for several years that have been brought to our attention. This is what's in front of us, It's our responsibility to provide adequate public safety service to the citizens of Volusia. And when I hear things like it's a $500,000 tax increase, which we've confirmed it's not quite, obviously I'm mindful of the price tag, but I'm also a little irritated that for council to go to zero budget when there are critical needs not being addressed, I don't find that acceptable either. So this is a perfect example as well as why we need to sit down and have a policy workshop and sit down as a council and figure out exactly where we have these other deficiencies within the county, lay it out, not say we've heard it before, but really dig deep, discuss it, figure out where we need to put our monies while we're having all these meetings, approving all of these things and putting our monies elsewhere, because we've been trying for 2 years to have a policy workshop, and now, you know, we're still yet to have a date with the new council. So, Donna, what will it take to, because really, however you put it, this culmination of what all these professionals in the audience have put together are working to bring our deficiencies, and I know everybody hates to hear minimal acceptable standards, but so not thinking of a specific number, but just, you know, I think our citizens deserve a minimal acceptable standard of service, especially in public safety. Good God, especially in public safety. And what's been laid out for us provides that minimal standard of service. We're looking at future, you know, we're already talking in here about, well, you know, in the future, of course, we're going to assess and look at things, and some things will decrease because now we'll be much more efficient and things will be running smoother, and, you know, we'll have a good thing, good SOPs going and things. But for now, in totality, what has been provided to us is solving the deficiencies that we have let go by for a decade. And Donna, you're talking to me about reserves. Do we have it in the budget to cover this, which to me brings us to the minimal acceptable standard of service for EMS for our citizens?
Can you say, what is this? What is this?
The proposal?
In-
The
in-
entire proposal in
okay.
totality. I thought I
Okay.
said in
That was
totality,
my
but,
question.
yep.
I think
I mean, we're going to
understand-
zero budget,
Well, d-
or
just
zero,
Zero debt.
Yeah,
Well,
zero
first of
debt.
all, I wouldn't recommend any of this be borrowed. That right off the bat, there's no reason doing borrowing for this.
but
But
I'm just
just-
upset that we're going to zero debt
No,
when there are critical
Listen,
needs that
my-
have not been addressed in the
I-
county
you-
for years.
Just, if, let me.
I
if-
know we're there.
Hold on, let's bring
Point.
it back under control.
Yeah,
She has
my
the
point
floor.
is that we're there. What do we need to get us to what all these professionals in the audience have gotten together over several months and determined that this plan, A through C, needs to be accomplished?
Okay.
Yep.
What you have in front of you, that was included in the PowerPoint, is based upon the implementation rollout that the team recommended. Because you can't do it all at one time, because you're just not going to be able to. They've got it staged, some of it in this fiscal year, 18-19, and some of it in pretty much in next fiscal years, where most of it is, because we're already 6 months into this fiscal year. What I've been able to identify for 18-19, there are some additional funds that we can use. Now, we'll have to appropriate those. That has not been officially appropriated in the budget, so that's one act. If you choose to go forward, we would have to appropriate. That's the first thing. When we start, one of the reasons for this discussion is because the manager will be recommending a budget coming forward for 19-20, and so this is a pretty large ticketed item, and it affects the general fund. So we're going to need to know council's direction on whether we incorporate this as part of our budget going forward for the 19-20 year to continue on with the recommendations made by the group. So what's in here is basically what was recommended by the group as far as a reasonable implementation plan for the 5 different recommendations that were presented.
So Joe, if, I know that you and I have talked extensively about this. Can A through Z not be implemented more condensed to get the ball rolling and get things done?
I think it's important for the whole group to understand a couple of things to implement this. One, it takes 90 days to clear a paramedic. Okay, so we have to set aside time to get them hired and then clear them. It takes 4 or 5 months to build the ambulance. So if we order 4 ambulances at a time, it could be 6 months. So there's a hard asset piece that probably would come first, because that's what takes, sorry, Italian, that's what takes the longest. Then there's the hiring piece, which is, the staff piece is in perpetuity. That's what, drives, the general fund transfer up. So listening to the discussion, the recommendation is, and one of the option is, we begin to start buying the hard assets with the one-time money. And then there's just a decision, when do we start with the staffing piece? Because there are some delays. We could get some of the interfacility going with current ambulances, but with the 50 we have, when you do the math on that, on any given day, at any given time, there may be only 3 or 4 available. So we need the hard assets. Got to have the ambulances. So that should be part of your decision making with the one-time money. And then we begin and start to choose the hiring process to coincide with delivery of ambulances. So if that helps you with this year's money, and then starting in next year's budget as we begin
And then
to build
I would
that.
add,
What's our best?
well, let me just add though, to take like nurse triage, which I think is very important part of this, and the educational pieces, which is very important. We're going to need partnerships. We don't control all the time on that. We depend on the hospitals who are going to help us with the with the staffing of the nurse triage. Your presentation shows, we'll be seeking grants as well as commitments from them to help with training and locating. This is a very specialized position. It's because it is rare. I mean, so this is something we're going to have to work with Las Vegas and some of the other folks that Joe's researched and worked with. So at the end of the day, some of that, and again, there's a lot of background work. If we have the direction we can be doing now with the staff now, it doesn't affect the budget, but it gets it ready. So that when you go into the next year, you can move quickly at that point. So again, I would say, Joe laid out what he felt like, we could do and accomplish, and broke it into the pieces using the one-time money. And again, I have some other scenarios, if how deep you guys want to get today, or we could come back with other points of it, but I do have, we're different speed. If we were to spread it out, we have that scenario. If you wanted to speed it up, we can take a look and see, what are those roadblocks that I would want to report, because I don't want to say, hey, we're going to have these ambulances on the road in August, only to find out there's a backlog. So I would want to know from Joe and the team, when you really could, have these assets in place. So and again, and talk to the doctor to make sure he's comfortable with the training and stuff that's required to do it. So it's a big ship. That's why, and it's why I wanted to have this. And I am sorry, by the way, we didn't have the large workshop, but I really felt it was important enough to take the bull by the horns and get going on it. So I had something here to talk to you guys about. And again, then we can go ahead and work on the nuances. You don't want to come to I didn't want to come in here with a skeleton and have you guys have to put a lot of meat on it. We got a lot of meat on here, and
Let's-
now you
let's
go
do
from
this.
there.
You've only heard from 2 people. There's 5 others that need to speak to this
Yep.
before we go forward, and in the essence, and for management of time, so we all will be able to share. Let's get the other 5 of us who haven't weighed in on this.
Thank you.
And are you good, Ms. Post, with what your question has been answered? I mean,
Sure,
okay.
sure, go ahead.
I
I'd
mean,
love to hear
I
from you.
think probably all of us up here, if money was no issue, would say do it all yesterday. But we've got to face the realities and make the decisions. I think we have to look at all that and have to weigh all that in.
Yes.
And in the mentioning of reserves, the reserves are basically a sinking fund. That's
Correct.
established in a replenishment of the equipment. It's not like money that's sitting there doing nothing. You have to have the reserves there.
Right, they're
If you-
spoken for, more or less. I
they're
mean,
spoken for to
right.
replenish the equipment and assets that you need to be replaced in a timely
Right.
manner. So you don't have to go into debt when the time comes. So
Exactly.
that's what the reserves are there for. If I had my wishes, which we know we'd only get about 5 or 6 weeks worth of this year's budget, because if we got everything in, our year ends September 30th. We're looking at getting ambulance. I would like to have all of the first phase of what we have in 2018-19 done, plus the nurse triage all this year, and go forward. We've got the money for the hard assets, the funding's there for 18-19, and then move the nurse triage in. I think that's going to give us the most value. What I want is the outcomes for the residents. It's incumbent upon us, and it's not really all a matter of money. It's a matter of providing the level of service that we feel and know that our residents deserve. And that's what we want to do. So what can we do to make the quickest impact upon our community in a positive way? So, Mr. Johnson.
One thing we have to remember, and I heard this question a while ago, is how do we get 10 years behind? You got to remember the recession put us behind on a lot of this stuff. The money was not there, and we had to take, and there was things we could not do for many years. Now it's started to change around. We're a unique county. Average times, you know, we keep hearing about response times. Well, we're a unique county, just the way we are, 1,205 square miles with a swamp down the middle where we can't pull all of our equipment in one place at a rapid time in case something happens. So it almost means in this county we have to double up, where a county like Seminole could more efficiently use what they have. And that's just absolutely the type of county we have. We're very fortunate for our services, and it's the double tier. Now, I know a few years back I had a little vapor lock out of my house in Glenwood, and the firemen were the first ones there, and I was sure glad to see them. And yeah, it took a few more minutes for the ambulance to get there, but I was comfortable because I have the knowledge of the expertise of our firemen in this county, and knew that I was well taken care of. I think probably, you know, public safety is our number one. That should be government's number one priority. And so we have to look at that. And when it comes down to times, the sheriff's department and ambulance and fire services all suffer from the same thing. But it's doing as well as we can. I strongly believe, and I've heard this, I think we need to go ahead and get the ambulances. That's the biggest thing that's going to hold us up, and they're not going to go bad. You're going to have them at the very least. What you can do is let one sit a day and get a few less miles on it and not wear it so bad. But you got to have that asset before you can do anything else. And who knows, there might even be a solution in that. At times you take off-duty firemen, put them in as a paramedic. Now you got an extra ambulance if you need to. You know, it's there's a lot of things you can do to help streamline it and get more people more and more involved, which I know each and every one of y'all are out here for one thing. That's to help save lives and do your job. So it's maybe another aspect of it of how do we fill it maybe a little quicker. So there's a lot of things we can do, and this time that we do step up to the plate, we have to do that, even if we have to cut somewhere else in the future in order to do it. And it's just, we just can't give everybody everything they want, but we do have to look at how do we get our people to the hospital. And I agree too with the nurse triage to get some of these calls where you're not having to answer this mundane call where the same individual fell off his bicycle again. that we've seen fall off that bicycle about once a week for years. And when I say that, y'all know that, and I'm not saying that as a joke. It's the same, you know, the same people you're going after time and time again. How do we keep them out of our ambulances and keep them out of the emergency room and keep us from having to handle that so we can handle the real call?
Ms. Wheeler?
Thank you. I'm going along with everybody else. This is number one priority. I can't speak for the rest of the council, but I think I can, that this is definitely a number one priority, our citizen safety. When I was a commissioner, I have to keep saying this, but in Daytona Beach Shores, that was always the first thing that we approved. I mean, we were always on top of the public safety. I mean, we just had to make sure that was covered. And I feel that way with the county because the fiscal things that happened in the last years and everything else, you know, we've had to pull back and whatever else. Well, we're at a better time and it's time to move forward. So our number one priority is that. But we also have fiscal responsibility, that we are accountable to our citizens. What I needed desperately, and from the time I took office, I started to evaluate this, and I was going to the different cities and talking to the different fire departments. What can we do better? And so those actions have been, I think, in the brewing with all of us. But I think the group, getting everybody pulled together, was the key. Was the key. Then you get the input of everybody at one time. I'm data driven. You know, don't come and ask for me to open up the checkbook. I have to know why and how you're going to use it, and I want to see that it's working. So I am also for the recommendation number one, getting the equipment that we need to have, and I'm for the whole thing. So there it is. But I'm also concerned about the financial responsibility. So I'm for the recommendation number one with all the trucks. But I also think the nurse triage would be a really top priority that I would like to see implemented as soon as possible. And that could also be another evaluation tool that we can see, how well is this working? Is this making any major changes? Is it filling in some gaps? You know, I think that's a real important component to all of this. This could help our guys a lot, you know, if they don't have all the mundane calls, and we can take care of them right internally. So that's kind of my thoughts. I'm for the entire thing. I think we need to take it in phases, but I would definitely be supportive of number one, the recommendation, and the triage. I just think that is an incremental part that we need to address ASAP, like in now.
Okay. Thank you. Ms. Gertman?
Thank you, Chair. I want to say thanks to the boots on the ground, right? The boots on the ground, the EMS management. I know you guys have done a great job with this. And one of the things that I think is real important is the staff and the morale. And where we talked about the service centers, the increase in service centers, giving the staff a better opportunity to do what they need to do during that day. That's key for me, as well as the nurse triage and developing non-medical or lower level acuity response resources. So for me, that needs to be moved up because I think that will help us re-educate, work to change the culture, which overall is going to bring about savings. I think our community, when I think back growing up, when anything happened, you called 911, right? There weren't other levels and options, and you just didn't think in that way. And I think we have grown up in a way that is the first thing you go to. So we have to re-educate, make that transition, evolve our community to know that there are other resources, and I think that will make a big difference. I appreciate how much urgency has been brought to this and the time that's been spent. I'm interested to know if all the municipalities were communicated with. I know we communicated at this level, but
We did through Mr. Rechtenwald's
Yeah, two
managers
groups,
group.
you know, the managers group, and then also through the Fire Chiefs Association. So, so they, you know, and all the fire departments are part of that, and then, of course, all the city managers.
Okay,
as well.
awesome. And that's one thing I had asked is,
Right.
was there input from everyone impacted? Because frankly, for me, if that's the case, and we've heard from the experts, honestly, there's not much more I can tell you that you're not telling me. I mean, I respect the fact that you've taken this to the level that you have, and you've made some very significant savings and changes based on your findings. You know, you were able to make a number of changes and bring on a number of staff and become fully staffed, and you did those things from taking that deep dive and look. So I think we've come to some savings just by doing that. And I also have to say thanks to Councilwoman Post for really helping to bring this urgency to the table, because I think that is what helped make this happen. So I certainly am in support of all the recommendations, but for me, the low-hanging fruit will be servicing our staff and doing the best we can to make them as first liners, first responders, give them the best opportunity to do their best job, and to change the culture of emergency care in our community, as well as the interfacility. I think there may be some other ways of getting to that resolution, so I'm really interested to see how, if you're going to take the longer trips off, if you can use some other means and resources to get to that. So I'm really more interested in seeing the lower hanging fruit first, and that would be the nurse triage and the staff resources. Thank you.
Would that not include the ambulances,
Well,
the purchase for the assets for the staff?
Well, there were 2 ambulances for inner facility, or 4? There were 4, right? So the 4 out the gate were for the interfacility, and I'm saying they're not clear whether or not they're taking the long trips off. Do you need
Still need
4 of
4.
them, whether you,
Still,
okay.
the-
So
the-
even
the
if you take
program-
that off the table, you still need 4?
Right.
Still, yes, ma'am.
Okay.
Okay, I just wanted to make sure.
Yeah,
So-
like I said, I support all options, but out the gate, I want to see us doing what we can on the immediate local level for the staff and for the re-envisioning of emergency services for the county.
Okay. While you're there, Joe, if we were to be able to see the way to get a consensus to fund the first phase of what we have listed here in 2018-19 in that budget, plus the nurse triage, that would go a pretty good way toward getting you to where you would like to be. A good
sir.
Otherwise, you wouldn't have probably pushed for that initially,
step.
because you and we had a meeting. I think all of us met with you individually, and that was the first thing that you looked at. Is Donna, you're looking at like you need to tell me something.
Just that if that's council's, consensus, or
Well, we
as if
haven't we haven't met.
Oh, okay, I'm just gonna say that,
We're still. I want to let Fred.
But here's how I know that, because we staff extra units now every 12 hours, and it's between 1 and 3, sometimes 4. So I already know what that's doing to the system and what the positive impact that has. So I can say that adding the interfacility program in is going to maintain that positive impact, because it's almost 1 for 1.
Okay, Fred.
I'll just be brief. Listening to everyone, I pretty much agree with everything I've heard up here. I just want to thank Joe and the team and for all the hard work and all the people that are here dressed in white today that do such a great job. We appreciate it so much. I think, Councilman, all of us up here, none of us are paramedics or firefighters. We don't have to get together and try to plan this out ahead of time. Would have been pooling our ignorance instead of helping. And I think you've taken the right approach by letting the professionals come back to us with a recommendation. I mean, Councilman Johnson probably has the closest experience of any of this of any of us up here. But okay.
Me too on occasion.
But we have come through a hard time. We have come through a recession where we just had to hold things down. And we didn't see much building going on during that time because hardly anybody was moving here. Now we're seeing growth, and it's just kind of like when I go past Thanksgiving and Christmas, have to buy a bigger belt. We got to expand here. We've got to look at some improvements and so forth. I appreciate so much the two-tiered system that we have here. It's awesome, and it helps in a lot of ways. I appreciate my Deltona buddies back there I see on the back row. Appreciate you being here today. But I definitely would like to see us do recommendation 1 and 2. I think that would get us on the right direction. Are you guys looking for just a recommendation and a thumbs up, or do you need a motion in regard to that?
We're going to finish the discussion.
Okay, all right. Well, I thank you for the solutions, and I just want to remind people that blame is spelled be-lame, and let's look ahead to what we can do to solve the situation. Thank you.
Okay. And just to touch briefly once on the economic situations, because it's not a laughing matter or funny matter that we are not where we were in 2006 or 7. We're still back in property values, not even 100% of where we were 12 years ago. We're still only about 80% in property values of where we were. So obviously there's a shortfall on ad valorem taxes. And when you take the fact that everyone that had the Save Our Homes cannot be increased, and a lot of houses were downgraded, and a lot of houses that came in on the market came in at 50% of what they were 3 years before, that's why we're struggling with that part of thing on the additional ad valorem taxes. They're down. But let me put this proposal out there. I kind of sort of did. Mr. Johnson.
I'd like to recognize somebody in the audience. We keep talking about ambulance services, and we have Mike Mellon back there. Mike Mellon was the architect of our air ambulance in this county. He is the one that put that up. Mike, stand up. No, he won't stand up, but by the same
He said
token,
no.
he is the man that was behind air ambulance and put it together in this county, and he just needs to be
Well,
recognized.
we appreciate that. Let's move on with this where we are. If we could get kind of a consensus that we could go with the 2018-19, which is highlighted there in the blue column, and add the nurse triage situation to that, find a way to fund it, bring it back to us, and see how that looks brought back to us. I think that would be a first step if everyone can see that that's a good step and a start in the right direction. So let's do that. We have a consensus to do that. We need to have a vote on the consensus or not?
Can we add also the additional service centers?
Which one's that?
That's 61,359.
I think that would be,
3. Number 3, right?
Mm-hmm. That's the, in 2019,
that's
20.
ongoing cost that's reflected for something that's put in there, I believe. I may be wrong. What, Donna?
It's
The
recommendation number 3.
61,359 is
It is,
ongoing cost for something that's already being put in.
It is
So it would already be included. in-
operating costs for 2 of the facilities and an ambulance service technician, so it's one person.
Right.
As I said, Fire Station 23, we're already working on that. In fact, that's, that process is moving along. So it would just be utility costs there and some small startup cost.
Yeah,
The Fire Station 12 one, I can move that out. That's not as critical as 23 is. And the 2 DeLand fire stations, we've already got agreements, and we're already getting ready to go into 83 with one of those BLS units. So we're already moving that along a little bit. Some minor startup costs we might be able to cover.
That would just be the annual cost, $5,000 a month. So that would fit into it. So if we have,
Perhaps we just move the person to make it easy today, let's just move the person, the AST, to next year's budget, and we could do it then.
that work? Okay,
If it works for him, it works for me.
Facility piece is really what we need to fund,
Okay.
just getting them in there.
well, I think we all realize the
I'm
urgency
okay with that.
of ordering
I know you are.
the assets.
I know you are.
We need to order the ambulances.
Ambulances, if you give us the consensus, we'll start that tomorrow.
Yeah,
Start
as long
that
as we have
tomorrow.
the direction, we have to come back to you
I understand.
because
But if you can start getting times, cost, the delivery times, I would say start getting that tomorrow or this
We
afternoon?
are, because there's, you know, there's chassis
I understand
issues
how-
that go with that, so that's not an easy process.
No.
If,
So-
if council will indulge me just a moment, what I'd like to do too by next council, if you want us to go in this direction, I'll bring back also an amended, we need to amend the budget for
Understand that.
1819. So I want to bring that back at next council. Is that what you would?
And if we bring that back next council, and we'll either accept the transfer or we'll amend it or whatever. That way we'll have something to vote on, and
That's when you can actually vote, because you'll see the
Okay.
implementation.
so that's the consensus. Ms. Gertman, did you have something else?
No, sir.
Okay. Ms. Dennis?
Thank you, Mr. Chair. I think this is a very good conclusion. At this stage, it's a first step for our first responders in making a good system great. You've identified, it's like the SWOT analysis, strengths, weaknesses, opportunities, and threats, and this is a very good path for our citizens. We're talking about the infrastructure here. We're talking about hard assets. What we haven't discussed is the patience, the end result here. We're data-driven, people responsive, but the bottom line is the outcome. And we have a two-tiered unified system, and I'm not sure in some areas that we're as unified as we need to be. Because we can throw millions of dollars at a project and put a new ambulance in every city and still not have addressed, and Councilwoman Gertman, you kind of said it, and I'm going to use your words to rework the culture. We have a cultural issue that has to be addressed, and it has to be, because we're dealing with this at a management policy-making level. The issues are always at implementation, at the point of service. It's at the point of service where it makes a direct impact for the citizen. It's at the point of service where we need your expertise and count on. And George, we have to have this conversation because now is the time. I find myself in a personal policy situation that I'm going to address this, because we've talked about, and I've heard it said, we need to reboot and reassess. Well, I'm going to make the statement that maybe we need to reboot some of the boots on the ground, literally. Because when I get different answers from top-level management on different issues regarding transport, and then when I can't, but bottom line is when I can't navigate the system on a personal issue, on a transport issue, when I can't do it and get the answers that I need and the response that I need, how are our senior citizens who are in a moment of trauma or crisis, or a young mother with a child, and the emergency system pulls up, how do they know what their rights are? George, we've talked about this. I want to see a patient bill of rights. I want to see a carbon copy form that, should anything be changed at point of service during transfer and or transport, that the citizen, anything that they sign, be left with them on site. Because in my situation, HIPAA has been used as a barrier instead of a protection for disclosure. And when I'm struggling with that, and those of you that know me, I can ask some questions and I know what to ask. So here's what happened. In council, I've only got one time to tell this, and this is the time. So here's what happened. After our oath of office meeting, my husband and my son were at a restaurant in New Smyrna Beach. My husband looks over at me and he says, "I think I'm having a heart attack." He goes gray and he starts sweating profusely. He's already had double bypass surgery and without been there. So I grabbed my keys, I threw it to my son. We're upstairs. I said, "Go get the car." The owner of the restaurant, Adam's downstairs. He hears everything going on. He says, "Dad," he said, "call 911." I said, "I'm call 911." Adam calls 911, gives me the phone. My husband went unresponsive, literally. And my son, who happens to be 6'2", thank goodness, we were on the second floor. He's running down the stairs. I yelled at him. He turns around just as my husband's getting ready to fall down those steep stairs. And he catches him. And I grab a chair. We're upstairs, sit him down. My husband goes unresponsive. Everybody showed up on time. The good news is response times were great. Response times were wonderful. So as my husband was becoming more alert, he says, I want to go to Halifax. His cardiologist is at Halifax. His neurosurgeon is at Halifax. The immediate response was, we can't go outside the area. We can't pass the closest hospital. I said, you don't understand. We're going to Halifax. So I had 3 fire there, and our 2 evacs showed up. And again, I said, we're going to Halifax. No, we're going to take you to New Smyrna, and if they decide it's a cardiac event, you'll be transported to Halifax. I said, I'm not doing double transport. We're going to Halifax. Again, I was told multiple times, repeated multiple times on site, no, we have a 12-mile rule. We can't bypass the closest hospital. Then he went on to try to explain to me the STEMI thing. I said, I understand that, but they put the 12 leads on him. Bottom line was he, at that time, didn't appear to present that. Okay. I'm going to Halifax. Ma'am, no, we have to take you to New Smyrna. And out of sheer frustration, I said, full disclosure, guys, I'm County Council Member Deb Denny's. I'm going to Halifax. And you need to now get out of my way because I'm going to transport. Where do I sign? I'm going to release you from liability. Where do I sign? And a form was provided. And I guess my husband said, you're in a blur. When you're in that situation, you're in crisis mode. As much as you think you don't know it at the time when it's your loved one. You just don't. At that point, my son had the car down at the curb, and we were still on the second floor. I said, if you're not going to transport, I need you to at least help me get my husband down these stairs and into the car, which our people, then our evac said, well, if you have another episode or something happens along the way, pull over and call 911, we'll transport. Really? Thanks. A lot. Oh, and I was informed to put the seat back so he wasn't sitting straight up. So I transport to Halifax. It's over. My husband comes home a couple days later without getting into all the medical things. I'm sitting out my front porch, thankful my husband's home, and taking a deep breath. And Dr. Springer calls. Mrs. Denny's, I'm calling to apologize to you. I said, for what? Mrs. Denny's, we have no 12-mile rule. I said, what? What?
Wow.
What?
Wow.
So now I went from being a concerned wife to a citizen going, what did you just say to me? And then I said, Dr. Springer, I didn't make a complaint. I didn't call it in. How do you know this? How do you know this? He said, we just want you to know, Mrs. Denny's, we're aware. Joe's going to be called, Joe Pozo, Mr. Pozo's going to be calling you shortly, and he did. Now I'm thinking about it, and I'm really thinking about it. Now you have a wife and a citizen and a policymaker rolled into one situation here. If I can't navigate this system and I'm being told this on site, we need a unified system, George. And this PLUS program, I want to see a copy of the contract because there's decisions being made at point of service. We can do all this great implementation. And I said this at our staff meeting. I've talked with staff. We've had these conversations behind closed doors on this issue, and I flat out said, if you had more millions of dollars in brand new ambulances, it would not have changed what happened on site. And that's got to change. And millions aren't going to fix that. So I was also advised to file a formal complaint for an internal affairs investigation. I decided last night, I'm not going to do that. That's not my goal. It never was. Because in 2000, Edgewater Fire first responders saved my husband's life. And EVAC transferred him to the trauma unit at Halifax. And I am forever grateful. The system works. Not always. But we have a culture. For some reason, there are those who think that they have, and the answer happened more than once. It rolled off their lips so easily that tells me it's internal. It's an internal issue that we have, George. We know that. We know we have.
Within the larger system of the two-tiered system.
There you go.
Right.
So, as I'm going to support this going forward, all the infrastructure, and I do. At the same time, I'm going to hold it accountable at the implementation level, George, because when I requested a copy of the form my husband signed, said I want to see because of release of liability. Okay, he signs. Okay, we're gone. So now you've got me thinking, like, okay, well, what did my husband sign? What did he sign? I asked for a copy of it. I was told, oh, because of HIPAA requirements, Mrs. Denny's, you can't get it. Okay, fair enough. Fair enough. George accompanied me with our fire chief, Smith, to the New Smyrna fire chief at their building. And they knew I was coming in. All I wanted was a copy of the form my husband signed. That's all I wanted. So when I sat down, the first thing I was told was about HIPAA. Okay, fair enough. Here's a form my husband signed. There's a copy of his driver's license. The signatures match. Okay, I'll take that. Good. I'd like to have a copy of it. The response was, we shred all our documents. Right?
Yep.
Right?
Right. The whatever the form that they used on scene, they transfer electronically, and then because they don't want that to, be seen by, a garbage man or something that's shredded.
Understood, but that's not what was told to me. The response
Right.
was, we shred all our documents. They said, that can't be your answer. That can't be your answer. You've got to have this somewhere.
So there's not an electronic copy of it?
Well, there is.
There is.
Oh,
Oh, so there is, but that wasn't the response. The response was, we shred it. So, okay, I said, well, I'd like to have a copy of that. Had the HIPAA file, HIPAA forms. The chief leaves, comes back, and I got 4 or 5 pages of internal printouts. And I'm looking at it. First of all, his name's spelled wrong, the address is wrong, the conclusion is wrong, and it's not the form I asked for. I said, with all due respect, I'm in here for one purpose. I want a copy of the form my husband signed. And again, the response was, well, we shred it. I said, you've got to have it on the computer. Well, we do. Okay, Chief, I'm going to wait yet again for you to leave the room and go get me a copy of the form. And he did. And when I looked at it, the legal form that we signed it's not really legal because he didn't print his name on the top of it, and it's supposed to be witnessed by at least 1 witness, if not 2. They don't exist. I could go on and on about this one minor transport issue that should have never happened to this degree. When I can't navigate our system, and I have to take my fire chief and the interim manager from Volusia County with me to go get a very basic form, and HIPAA is used as a shield instead of a protector, we've got an issue. George, what I would like to, we've talked about this on site, and by the way, there is no 12-mile rule, and I will say to George's credit, on January 14th, he reissued the Transport Policy 200-001 was sent throughout the county. This is why. But I'm going to back up. And I want to thank Dr. Springer and Joe Pozo and Mr. Rechtenwald. They've been brutally honest with me. We've had a very honest conversation about fixing this. But one thing Dr. Springer said to me in his original call was, Mrs. Denny's, we've heard there's been an issue like this around the county. But because so much time passes, because when you're in a crisis mode and time goes by, you don't remember. The spouse doesn't remember, the family doesn't. You're just going. We couldn't document it and prove it till now, and unfortunately, it's you. You got my attention. Because it's not me. It's still not just, if it's happened to me, it's happened to others. It's happened to others. We have to fix it. I'm not going to file a complaint, formal complaint. And I do not blame the 3 New Smyrna firefighters that were there first. I do not. Because they've obviously been told that. So please understand, I'm not finger pointing here to individuals on site and on scene. I am not. But I am going to assure this doesn't happen again. So George, this is an opening, so while I'm going to support all the infrastructure and all this hard equipment that we're doing, it's for nothing if we don't get it down to the point of service with our citizens. So that's the last I'm going to publicly say about this issue, but it's bigger than this. George, I need you to...
Yeah, let me, first off, thank you for bringing it forward and sharing your personal experience. And we've talked along with the others. You know, we're committed, and I opened a little bit with in the statement that, again, our system depends on seeing treatment. All getting there is just part of it. And so I think that illustrates that. And it illustrates the complexity of the systems that we have out there today. And we're committed with the leadership team that we have to train. We will continue to work, I think, more together. And I will tell you, I think today, showing the leadership of putting the investment in the system is a great signal to the boots on the ground, to the sergeants, to the captains, the other folks that are working out there every day, that we are committed to having a great system. So with that, we can definitely work with the people in the field who should feel that, having more investment in that system is our commitment, and then their commitment needs to be further training, scenarios, and better customer service as needed, better information, as we've talked about, education on what a patient's rights are, better documentation. We'll improve on all those areas, I assure you, and it starts with the leadership that we are putting in place now and the leadership you guys have shown today by giving us direction to invest in that system. So I assure you, you will see that culture change.
Okay. All right. Let's take this is over with. You have the direction. We'll take a 15-minute break and be back here at 4:30, 4:30, sorry.
DeGray?
We will be reconvening the council meeting in 2 minutes or less. 2 minutes, T minus 2 minutes. Okay, I think everyone is here but Billy, and it will be 4:30 right now, so we'll go ahead and reconvene the council meeting, and fire away, Janine.
All right. Janine Jennings, Director of Purchasing and Contracts. I'm here just to simply introduce and read into the record item 12, which is a protest of the recommendation of award for janitorial services. County issued RFP 18P164 JRD for janitorial services. We received 9 responses. Recommendation of award was posted on December 3rd after receiving a recommendation from an evaluation committee who is here. The protest was received by 3H on 12/7, and 3H did follow all of the procedures in our protest procedures. A protest was received by myself. Within that time period, I reviewed the protest and I denied the protest. They then escalated it to Interim County Manager George Rechtenwald, who also reviewed and upheld the denial. This is 3H's protest, and this is their opportunity to bring it forth to the County Council. They have 10 minutes to present their case to reverse and throw out the recommendation of award. Thank you.
Okay, and I think Russ Worthington is going to make the presentation, and you are aware of the criteria that you may speak to.
Yes, sir, I
Okay.
am. Just had a couple of points of clarification before we get started. Yeah, initially it's 10 minutes, and I understand that. I know we had requested 40, so I'm going to speak fast because I'm a fast talker since I only got 10 minutes. And I know the questions, I'm assuming the questions will be at the end. Am I correct?
If there are questions, they would be at the end as opposed to the middle.
Yes, sir.
Okay.
Well, thank you first, Council, for allowing 3H to get their point of view across to you. Just a point of introduction, my name is Russ Worthington. I'm the Director of Business Development Contracts for 3H. But what you don't know, I've got 40 years of experience in procurement, 20 years in the Air Force and 21 years in public procurement. So just to give you a little background, I'm not talking to you about something I don't know. It's something I talk about, something I train on other counties on. And that's where I'm coming from. The first part of the presentation is Florida Statutes 287.001 and 286.011. Why is this important? Why is it important to you? Well, 287 is the procurement statute of Florida statute. And I like to read it because I think it's very important. When I wrote purchasing procedures throughout the state, this is the first thing I put in. It says, the legislator recognized that the fair and open competition is a basic tenet of public procurement, that such competition reduces the appearance and opportunity for favoritism and inspires public confidence that contracts are awarded equitably and economically, and that documentation of each act taken and effective monitoring mechanisms are important means of curbing any improprieties and establishing public confidence in the process by which commodities and contractual services are procured. I think it's very important for you. The other part of 286.011 is the minutes of the meeting, and any such board or commission or state agency or authority shall promptly recorded, and such records shall be open to public inspection. What that normally means is court reporter or voice recording. And I'll show you why this is important after we go through the whole presentation. Your own policies and procedures, page 17, evaluation committee definition and meeting summary. The evaluation committee ranks or shortlists respondents to the ITN, RFP, or RSP. This is not limited to any certain number of members. It also says ranking and why. The meeting summary of any public meeting shall be made available to public review. I already show you this in violation of Florida Statute 286. It didn't say you could do a summary. Summaries are not allowed because you can't legally and publicly answer a vendor's question if you do a summary of what happened in that meeting. That's why it says record. Next slide. During the evaluation committee meeting, the ballot sheet that they used, and I'm going to read the bottom note because it's very small, but I think it's very important. The meeting started at 1 p.m. on Friday, November 30th. All committee members were present. John Duckworth from purchasing was present. There was one member of the public present. Brief instructions were delivered to the public attendee regarding required meeting conduct. All county employees were induced. Duckworth reviewed the meeting guidelines, purpose, and project background, evaluation criteria, and responded. Duckworth reviewed submission pricing, reference sheets, and Dun & Bradstreet key indicators. Duckworth reminded the committee that 2 contracts may be awarded, one for library services sites and one for the county. Rhonda Orr opened the discussion by asking committee members to provide the top choices, which included 5 companies: American Janitorial, DNA, United, RC Tech, and Diversified Maintenance. The committee didn't discuss those. What should raise your attention is there was 9 proposals. You can't single out 4 or 5 or 2 or 3. You need to discuss all proposals at the evaluation committee. That was not done. Did it declare any of them non-responsive? No, that I know of. The meeting adjourned at 1:40. I can tell you from my experience of 40 years, 40 minutes for an evaluation committee meeting of 9 proposals of this contract magnitude, something's wrong, something's fishy, something doesn't add up. But the thing is, they were using ranking. I'll get into that a little bit more, but they only discussed 5 out of 9 for the county side and only discussed 5 and 8 for these library sites and did not even rank the other ones. They didn't rank them after they decided, well, these are my top choices. Yeah, we care less about the other ones. We're not going to talk about them. Not fair, not equitable. That's why I read that Florida statute to you. It's not fair and equitable to any contractor, no matter if it's us, 3H, or any of the other contractors, that they were not treated fairly. Again, on the question, why did it only 40 minutes? They did not discuss all the elements. There was 10 elements identified in the contract RFP that went out. They did not, according to what information I've got, of course, this is a summary because they did not record it, so I can't verify it. They did not discuss all the elements. Next slide. Don't say that. Evaluation criteria, invalid. Why? Because typically, throughout my years' experience, it's points or percentages. Ranking came about 10 or 12 years ago, and I know the lady that developed it and the lady that sold it. Did I ever use it? No. Why? Because it's hard to explain to another contractor how you got raised, how you come up to that point, that why they're not being recommended for award. Ranking has no basics of discussion as far as what points went where, what you deducted, what you awarded. Is it because they had more pages? Is it because it looked pretty? I don't know. And they don't know. Why is ranking in points and percentage elements of the evaluation criteria important? Because then they can debrief a contractor and tell them why they did not get an award. Very important. And in Florida statutes, at the state of Florida, they don't use ranking. they use points or percentages, and that's in their procedures. Hard to justify who is the best and debrief the other contractors. Normally, if you got a contract or a proposal of this magnitude, you would go through the full process, which is normally the RFP, the new short list, or you would have it also included in there, oral presentations or best and finals. Why would you have best and finals? Because in RFPs and proposals, you can negotiate. So you ask for the best and final, you get a better pricing. Probably 95% of the time, they revise their pricing. That was not built into this procedure. Why? I don't know. Why I would use it? Because I want to make sure if I was talking to you as a council member or a board member like I used to, I want to make sure I was able to answer every question that you have and be able to back it up. Next slide. One of the key things is some of the major departments were not on the evaluation committee. It's not limited to 5, 4, 3, 2, 1. Facilities was not on there. Fire services was not on there. Sheriff's office was on there. There was a lady that was on there from the sheriff's office. But you have a lot of districts that do evaluations that one of the districts were not included. So your public works department was not on there. Is that fair? I don't think so. And I don't think you would think so either with the magnitude of this contract. Next slide. Best interest of the county. How can the purchasing contracts department recommend award of a contract costing more than $383,676 per year or $1,918,000 over 5 years over the current contractor's proposal for this requirement who has had no deductions or major findings over the term of the contract? How can you even do that? I would think the sheriff's office, or even what I just heard a minute ago, EMS would be glad to have that $383,000 or $1.9 million to do what they need to do. Is that due diligence to the residents? I don't think so. I mean, I'm a resident of Volusia County, has been for over 15 years. I don't think it's fair. I don't think it's right, even if I was not talking to you today. Best interest of the county. 3H is asking that you uphold the protest and reject all proposals and revise the evaluation process to include points or percentages for each of the 10 elements and solicit new proposals. That's all we're asking. We're not saying award it to us. We're asking to do it fair and reasonable as Florida Statute 28701 talks about. That way everybody's on the same level of playing field. They can explain to you or they can show you in writing why they deducted points, why they thought this particular vendor was better than the others, besides the pricing issue. Pricing is just one thing that, again, is just an element, one of the 10 elements of the 10 elements that were included. And thank you for your time, and I know you're going to have questions.
Okay. Thank you, Mr. Worthington. I'll just make my comments. This was an RFP, not a bid process. I think staff has the flexibility, if I understand it, to accept the proposal that they feel is best will satisfy the needs for which we were seeking. I looked at part of the bid that was submitted. I wasn't on the bid committee, but I certainly wouldn't have extended or offered that bid to someone who gave me a list of customers as a recommendation, and then when those customers are called saying they would never use that particular company again, if that were the issue. We wouldn't use one that says that has been cut, the proposal has been cut and pasted using Atlanta as the place that they're doing business as opposed to Volusia County. And I think that those are probably some of the fact, and the people that on the committee that made the decision have shared other issues that there were with this one. And my recommendation would be a denial, but I'll leave that up to the council. Mr. Johnson.
I have some of the same concerns you do. And I know you mentioned the sheriff's department only had one person. Well, I think I can probably talk with some authority on that, that one individual, it all funnels all back to, they funnel the information to the administration of the Volusia County Sheriff's Department, and that person will carry whatever the message is. But I am like the chair. when you do a proposal, you know, we just had a group in here and you were here, the firemen were here, and you looked at them, all of them were prepared, they were showing their best, looking good. Well, I've looked over this proposal and I'm like the chair. Our rich history and organization makes 3H not only the right choice, but also a safe choice for the city of Atlanta. This is DeLand. 3H kickoff meeting with the customer representatives discussed important issue occurring during transition and contracted period. Once again, how long have y'all been here? Another one, page 84, talk about the airport community. And my favorite, remove ice and snow and apply de-icing material to walkways in winter months. This is not a well-prepared piece of work, and whoever did prepare it for you, I would strongly have a word for them before they prepared another one. But when you come in front of us, especially for something this major, what you present kind of shows what may be there, and you need to do a better job of that. Plus, as he said, when the background's been done and people are complaining, you need to work on that aspect. Not saying in the future it may not be the best choice, but I've got my issues too.
I need a motion for denial or acceptance.
I move that we deny the protest.
Second, Gertman.
Motion made by Dr. Lowry, seconded by Mr. Johnson. Sorry, Barbara.
It's fine. I'm
You
just
were close.
practicing.
I
was
know.
practicing.
So, any further discussion on this issue? Any objection to the motion? Hearing none, the motion passes for denial. Thank you. We'll now move to item 13. And this would be George Baker.
All right, thank you, Mr. Chair and Council. We are now bringing forward a recommendation of award of American Janitorial Incorporated for this janitorial contract.
Okay, Council, you have that, Ms. Denny's.
Mr. Chair, move approval of the agreement for janitorial services with American Janitorial Incorporated 18-P-164JRD.
Motion made by Denny, second by Wheeler to approve the agreement for the janitorial services with American Janitorial Incorporated. Any discussion? Any objections to the motion? Hearing none, the motion passes unanimous. And we're sorry we kept y'all here this late. We got you out of here before 5, which is probably a great achievement. Thank you very much. (14) we have already covered, and then we'll go to, that's pretty much it, isn't it? George?
Just quickly,
That was almost too late. John, I told you had 3 times each meeting, not 4. Public participation. Pardon? So you're not going to? Okay, thank you. Okay, George.
just a quick informational. I will be out of town Thursday and Friday, but available. You and I, of course, will work on my conference call. So I just want to let everyone know that I'll be out on Thursday and Friday, and Donna will have the helm here locally, and but I'll be available the whole time.
Okay. Mr. Eckert.
Nothing, sir.
And we'll start with Mr. Johnson.
Yeah, I'm tired and I want to go home.
Mr. Lowry.
I'm good.
Ms. Post.
George, where are we at on actually scheduling the priorities workshop?
Well, I had longer hair and then I ripped it out.
Me too.
But We're still trying to get a date. We have, Donna and I have talked to some facilitators that had been recommended. And that's another thing, you guys actually have several different facilitators in play. And then, of course, you know, pretty much what we're hearing, they would like us to schedule a day, but they could do it in 6, compacted in 4, but they really don't want to leave you hanging if you were to do that. But right now, we're still having a devil of a time getting all of you guys scheduled for that. So I would ask that we have that discussion, or you go back and, I mean, Maria has really tried to work with everyone to get a date. So,
Well, how about this? Can we have that discussion? I know, obviously, it's been very hard to get our schedules together, and now we're looking into March as well. So, are we vehemently against having it extend on a county council meeting day when we were all here? Obviously, not on a day like this, but you know, if we end at 12:30 or.
You know me, I don't know why it takes so long to get 7 people's calendar together. I know that is an issue. The other thing that comes into play is the facilitator. So we have to get a date cleared, and if you can find a date.
Be open though. I mean, if we can get our schedule together and pick 2 dates, I think that they might be, you know.
I don't know what
Are
they
we
can do.
open?
What I'm saying is, let's see if we can find a meeting date that the facilitator can work before we say we're going to commit to that day. I would
do
have
that?
one. I'll set any day you want to set. I'm not trying to delay this. I would
We
do
do
it.
that?
Right, and you're not either. But I will do it I'll pick a whole day. I'll pick another day. We were originally trying to say a Tuesday that wasn't meetings.
Sure.
I'll do a meeting, a workshop at night, if you want to do that.
So can we figure that out now though, before we head out?
We can't figure that out until we find out.
Well, I can tell you this much, the facilitator that, at least the one that you suggested, Mr. Chair, that was the most wide open on availability time up until about middle March. And then he would still be available, but then it would get trickier time-wise. But he's pretty wide open till the middle of March.
Well, let's try to pick a time that he can do it, and if only 5 of us show up,
Well,
only 5 of us show up.
I mean, he said he's open.
Right.
He's wide open for the month, so
It's pretty much through
We
the
can-
middle of March.
there's our dates.
So if you, I will have, of course, Maria's under the weather today, but I will, if she's in tomorrow, I'll get back and we can list out, well, here's when he for sure is, and let's get it scheduled. And as far as staff perspective, of course, we work around you, so we'll make that happen.
Is that a
I can do
commission?
March 8th. That's a Friday. I have stuff there, but I can reschedule. I mean, if it's a matter of getting us all together at one time, is it?
Oh. I have a lunch, I'm speaking to a group at 11:30.
I can't do it. I got a conference I'm committed to all day, Friday, 28th.
I mean,
Are we all completely, are we definitely saying we will not do it on a council day? I mean, because we know we're together on a council day, and so that seems to be the issue, is our calendars get really full. So, I mean, is it that horrible to have it as an extension of a council day?
Well,
We're
I
all
had
gonna be here.
suggested possibly after a TPO board meeting, because 5 of the 7 of us are already committed in that morning, and we're usually done by 10:30, 11 at the latest. We could go from there over to Daytona Beach Airport, use that conference room, bring lunch in, and stay there the rest of the time, have a working lunch.
You know,
that's
Heather has
the
a point.
27th of February.
Heather has a point. I mean, you know, just we schedule a light agenda one, we can just get it done then. We already know we got to be there. And just,
So we're coming upon full agendas with the budget as it starts coming. Could we not do the 27th of February, which is the TPO, which will be over by noon? Huh?
No, I've got 3 different
And usually I schedule more than
I've
one
got-
thing on the day when I have,
I'm speaking at something that morning. And Volusia managers meeting at the airport.
you would think this would,
This is what I'm saying, you can't, what, couldn't we not, I mean, we're here on council days.
understand that.
Okay.
I mean, I had suggested, I would even be willing to try to pick a date that we have a council meeting.
Let's.
I just
then
talked
let's do that.
to Clay, to your first meeting in March, he does have, because he actually, you know, we advertise off a lot of stuff off of what he's doing. So we could check and see, he's got 3 items on the meeting, but maybe we could like keep it light other than that and then move, maybe even start a little earlier on that first meeting in March. And that might be a way to get it all in if we
Even
could
if
do
it was a
that.
normal council meeting, I mean, this is, I think we've only had 2 that have ever gone to this time frame since I've been here.
Right.
So even if it was a 2 or 3 o'clock meeting, I mean, I'm
Okay,
more than happy
let's
to
move
stick.
on. March 5th. We're going to do it. After the meeting. And what I would suggest on that date,
First.
No, March 5th,
it's a council meeting,
council meeting day.
Okay.
okay? So what I would suggest is, George, that for that day only, you know, if we need a resolution or something to change the date or the time start, then we start that meeting at 9 o'clock. Yeah. Huh? I don't like that either, folks, but, I mean,
Well, I could bring that back with, I'll talk what our requirements are to move it to 9, if that's your pleasure, and then knock out the items. I have to make sure that he's advertised them though, you know, not at like 10 or something. I don't know.
I think the public is used to it
Right.
starting at that time too, so.
okay,
I mean,
But
it's only an hour.
there's going to be an objection to everything we
Exactly.
have,
No, I
or
think
conflict.
you're on the right track though, of trying to keep that
follows
day
the
light
meeting.
and then have it on that day.
We'll keep the meeting at the same date. We'll have a workshop on the 5th of March.
Yay.
Okay, and a facilitator will be there, pardon? Start at 9. And we'll start, no, they said start at 10. I don't know, the people that objected to starting it early. I don't care.
I don't think it's
I'm
Howard.
I'm just happy we're having one.
We
So
started,
that's good.
That's why I thought you'd
Okay,
be happy to start at 9.
absolutely. I don't, I don't even care.
It's only
That's
taken
great.
2 years, Heather.
I know, 2.5.
Direction, where's council want to go? Start at 9, raise your hand.
I was just thinking of the public, 9 o'clock, it's fine.
Y'all just tell me when to be here.
Pardon, 9 o'clock?
okay.
On the 5th, I can get up at 4 and be here. I'll do that.
You're not getting up at 4.
Well, I get up at 5 to be here at 10. I've got to get my hair done, my makeup on, and all that good stuff. It
You
still
get up
doesn't
at
help.
4, you get up at 4, it's a short
Anything
trip.
else, Ms. Post? Anything else so we can get home before dinner?
No, sir, that was it. That was the one objective. That's excellent.
Okay, Ms. Wheeler.
Just announcing that Councilmember Denny's and myself were appointed on the Florida Association of Counties, their new water policy committee. So we're really excited to represent and bringing forth this new committee that was just created. So just as an FYI.
Okay, Ms. Denny's.
Thank you, Mr. Chair. Yeah, and there's only 34 appointees from around the state, and Volusia has 2 seats at the table, and we will be working with the governor to craft some water quality policies for these next couple of years. So it's a real honor for Volusia that we have 2 seats at the table, and some counties have none. So woo-hoo for us. To that degree, Friday at the Brandon Center will be the Indian River Lagoon council meeting. We brought it to Volusia County instead of South Florida for our first meeting this year. So that's what's going on. Next week, I will be in DC for the annual FAA Commercial Aerospace Conference, and we'll bring a report back when I get back. That's all.
Okay, thank you. Ms. Gertman.
Thank everyone for being here, and I know I reference this often since I'm new, oblige me. being part of a long-standing campaign and hearing from a lot of the constituents, a lot of the concern that I heard, or one of the concerns I heard was about unallocated funds and a secret pot of gold that we have. And the question doesn't go away. And to me, it's important to build the public trust and to respond to the issues that come to the table, not kind of bypass it and act like it doesn't have relevance, right? Answer the question and answer it in a way that the public can understand it. So in response to that, I'm asking the staff if we can do a external audit. An external audit that will look at our unallocated funds and investments, but also creating verbiage or community resources to help them understand how we work, how our funds work, how our funds are allocated. Because I think it's important, again, to re-educate the public for the vision that we're trying to create and recreate. So,
this is something that we have all are facing, because people do not want to accept the fact that allocated and designated are two different things. And
well,
that's the one.
it may not be a point of them not accepting the fact. It may be them not understanding the fact, because the way we're communicating with the public is not clear.
Okay, one of the things, the first thing I asked them, I said, I'm sure all of you, when you worked, you got one check at the beginning of the year.
Who are the them that you're responding
I've talked to hundreds of people. I've talked to
Probably
local,
not the same people I'm speaking to in my district and those that I,
but I mean,
ran with.
the one thing
so-
that the biggest thing that they don't understand is 80 to 90% of our funds come in November and December. That funds sit there to pay for the bills all the way through September. That's a part of it, but which has to be done, and they don't understand.
Then
that.
you're making the case for why we should create a better way of communicating with the public to help them understand, instead of us making it's too complicated for you to
I
understand.
didn't say it's complicated.
No, I'm not saying that you
No,
did.
no,
I'm
I
not
mean,
saying,
I don't want that word complicated.
I'm not saying
'Cause this
you
thing,
said that.
Next thing I know, it'll be stupid. I didn't say stupid or complicated. I'm just saying that it's there.
I'm saying that let's see if there's a layman way to make this communication resonate, and where we can educate our public on a number of the systems that we're working to change to evolve and revision our county.
Second that idea.
I got a good idea, I think. I agree. I could tell you, I've been congratulated on being the city manager more than I have on the county manager. So I would tell you that we do need a lot of education. People, as far as what's going on out there, I'm committed to that. To specifically this issue, why don't we have James Moore, who's going to be doing he's our external auditor. We can have him issue a report on those funds, and then we can build off from that. What he says, we'll make sure then gets into some sort of a public information presentation that we can take on the road or have with us, because I do really feel that along with many other issues, we need a lot more public outreach. And if we can get something, that I like to use graphics and stuff with some of these, and we can put that together and they could take a look at that. So we can have James Moore, who's doing our external auditor now. We can ask him to include a section on that issue, and then we'll build off of that for the education.
I just think the more we get in front of the concerns of the public and respond to them, is the more we rebuild the trust. Because it many times, if we respond like, okay, we've already explained this to you, then it's like we're not really taking into consideration the people, the public, and their needs. And that's who we're here to serve. So that's just my own perspective.
Absolutely.
And thank you.
And I would even go a step further on that, Barb, and we did it with one group last year. Meet with them individually here in the county and let them see individually and we need to do it broadly, yes. Mm-hmm. But anyone who has individual concerns, Donna, George, and you sit down with them and show them and right there so they can look at it right in the books as well. That works. Putting it out there publicly, putting it on the website, publishing it, put it in the paper.
But we all need to be speaking off the same sheet.
So I
So
think
it
that's what
needs to
starts
be
good with
represented in a
James
way
Moore's
that is the
report.
same message that we're all communicating. And I think that what is part of what makes a difference.
Well, I think that part makes a difference because the big thing that this council has done historically is to dedicate funds for projects once they're put on a capital program. And those funds are set aside. If it's $100,000, it goes 20,000, 20,000, 20,000, 20,000, 20,000. So while you may look and see that there's $80,000 in there in the fourth year, well, where's that money? That money's dedicated to buy this.
Understand?
And that's probably. Let me wait a minute. Ben's got his light. Ben.
Back, I don't think we're doing it now, but back in the 90s and early 2000s, there was a very simplified budget that went out. And it wasn't your big budget, which nobody has time to go through, and even most of us have trouble understanding. This was just a budget overview that told how much is there. And we could show how much does it start, how much for operations, how much for maintenance, how much for building. And at the end of the year, it shows, you know, how much carryover. Because I know what she's talking about, and we've all heard it. There's $500 million hidden away. But to show that this is our bank account starting here, and here it is at the end of the year after you paid all your bills. But keep it simple.
Right.
If somebody wants more than that, we can get them more than that. But that'll pretty well cover it, and it'll be a simplest form to do it. And that might help quite a bit to go with where you're talking about.
Okay, I'm going to speak. I agree with you, Barbara. I think that's a comment that we're hearing all the time. The best way for us to do it is get the audit, have him do a presentation, let us all have a simplified sheet so we are all presenting the same message out there. And yeah, we all understand, and we understand about the 20,020, but they don't, and it's what they don't understand is what creates the problem. So let's have it all out there and let's all have the same message. I think we got it.
Yeah.
Thank you.
Just one quick example on that. It was explained to the group, and they were given all the time, this one particular group, and some of us know who that was. I won't call their name, and they still don't believe it. And it was explained to them point by point. It wasn't your group.
You have nothing to do with what they believe. All we can do is present it and have the information available for the public.
Well-
If they choose not to trust, there's nothing more you can do.
Well, if
But
we-
at least that information is readily available, it's in layman's terms, it's accessible, and we've done our role, we've done our job. So, I mean, I'm just saying, the more we get in front of those concerns.
It's done.
Okay,
We'll do it.
thank you.
Just a couple of points. One, I attended my first Sunrail meeting, which was just a blast. A real slice of lemon chiffon pie. And when I brought up a couple of points to the director, Dan's over there laughing. They knew I was there. They knew I wasn't there to just make points, because I said I want to ensure that Volusia County residents are not going to be paying for something for which we're not going to get. I got the verbal assurance from them. I then tried to turn around and pin them down on what they had said we needed, and that was that we would adopt a resolution to go to FDOT, because FDOT's putting us off, saying we have to have one from each of the members individually, then we've got to have a request from you as a collective commission or board. And so all the board members agree with all the changes, and so we've asked them to do that. But then they used the excuse they kicked it down the road with the new transportation secretary, who I think is going to be more receptive to our needs. But they do know that we are serious and that we have concerns, and that I don't want our taxpayers stuck with those cost of the 11.2 miles that we're probably never going to get, because there's no source of funding. And we said if the funding is there. And also we did make a difference. And I think that they understand, after the meeting, and John Booker agreed that they knew I was there and that we mean business. And so that was just, the sad part is I asked for another meeting because their next meeting is not till May 30th or 31st. I'm going, you go from a meeting in January and not another meeting to do anything until May? I said, can we meet individually and get some of this stuff done? No, they didn't want to do it. So our next meeting is May 30th, which will...
Wow, may as well be June.
We might as well. I think they probably did it on May 30th just to keep it from being 6 months almost away. But anyway, I'm going to meet individually with the director. John and I are scheduling an appointment to go over and meet with them. I can't meet with the individual members since it's, again, Sunshine, so I cannot meet with them. But I'm going to do everything I can to protect us. They did give me the insurance collectively that we will not have to pay for what we don't have. Wasn't that right, Dan?
Is that recorded?
Yeah, yeah. Mayor Dyer said that.
Is it already transcribed? Dan?
That's the commission's position. It may not be FDOT's at this
FDOT's,
point.
yeah.
Well,
okay.
but I mean, that's the
Yeah.
point. And we're trying to get and FDOT puts off and says, well, you put all that into writing, and then, but you got to do it individually. And I said, well, we'll do ours. Will anybody else? So who knows what they do from our last meeting until May 30th, which may not even have a quorum. I mean, we may not even have it, which wouldn't surprise me. But we're going to work on it. And we do have that assurance, and I think that was good getting them to agree individually that we're not going to have to. As well as one of the things that is being pushed for by, I believe it's Osceola, that they want FDOT to take it for the additional 5 years. Dan, help me out on that one. I think it was Osceola.
I think Osceola's view is that there should be a, well, they have, I think they have maybe a more nuanced position than this, but what their basic position is that they should at least get 7 years of FDOT funding from the time that their rail was put into service, which would be from July or August, I forget, of last year. That they should get the full benefit of 7 years. That helps us. It doesn't fully address our issues, but that we're helped by that position should the states accept it.
And then what I'm going to push for, if they do that, I'm going to push for FDOT funding it from now and ever.
So that'll work.
at least till 2035, right? It's when you can back out. Anyway, anything else? It was a long meeting, but a lot was accomplished today. I'm happy that we have it done, and we will adjourn at 5:11.